last thing is there were 2 files on that drive. One of them ended in NK.
I saw your note.
That's all?
Yeah, that's the one that's up there.
Thank you.
Yep. The power went out this morning actually for
Yeah.
30 seconds. Mm-hmm. No, it's old. It was great. We just got this all set up and the power went out. We're like scrambling. That was weird.
Why isn't City Hall on power? On the back of power?
I don't know, there may be the police department.
Yeah. I think they should be, I mean, in an emergency, you need City Hall.
Well, somebody has to bring it up. Hi, Carl.
Hey, Carl. Hey, buddy. Nice to see you. Nice to see you.
You looking chipper?
You guys, you guys have some
You looking chipper?
Good. Your hands are sensitive.
Good guy, Sheriff. 4 other people?
Yeah, 4 other people, yeah.
In this town? Couldn't find any.
That's what I think that's what's needed.
Heard of it?
If you want,
Yeah.
Coming back. No. So it was about I think it was related to the house. She wanted to see that.
Oh, you mean the new ordinance in the state together?
That she design guidelines that we're writing now to cover the new housing requests from the state.
That's what I did.
She's got a lot there. I mean, I wish I had said all this time that we're putting in housing is complete waste. Number one, this bill is not gonna survive the next 12 months. We're gonna put all this time into it. When you've got half of the cities in California coming in against it. You know, it's not gonna survive or somebody's gonna work it.
Yes, you're right. Well,
Marcus had said the same thing. He said, what are we doing? Just holding it the state. Yeah. I should have chimed in. Wanted him to get support even on Gerald. His style is brilliant. But he's right about that. I mean,
I think so. Yeah, Kathy's still, there's still some copies that are printing right there, but it's okay. It's copy after copy. So, yeah, so we're just working on those.
Hello. Okay. Hi, everybody. The stalwarts. It's been a long time no see, right? How many? It's like a couple hours.
What happened to our lives?
I know. I really admire it. I really do. I appreciate it, and I want to thank everybody, all us unpaid, stalwarts. I appreciate it so much for your involvement. We're going to call the meeting to order. It says roll call, but I can see that everybody's here, so I don't have to do that. There is a public comment period right now on non-agenda items. Does anyone have anything to say about something that's not on the agenda? It could also include observations from last night as a prompt.
I can't speak more than once, can I? I can't get.
My husband put my backpack, my pen. Do you need the pen? Where? Oh, it's on my chair. Sorry. Nobody? Come on up.
Can I speak once?
Yeah, I mean, if you could come to the mic, would be great.
I'm Neil Cruz, and again, repeating, we like where you guys are going. Really glad for the moves that you have made, and we appreciate it, and we appreciate also your openness to. The housing issue seems to be a really big deal coming in on the design tradition stuff. The state is not done. They're going to keep going until we stop them. And I think there should be a very concerted effort on the part of Carmel to join with the other cities that are fighting SB 9 and get the heat up on the state, or there's nothing, they're not going to stop with SB 9. So they're taking away the zoning from you guys and they're taking it to the state. That's where this is headed. They're removing local control and they're making it state control. And at least on some measure, I hope that the city of Carmel would take a stand on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Neil. Anyone else on housing or any other topic from last night? Anyone have a spare pen? This one's broken, the one I brought. Thank you.
There you go, pass that one down.
Okay. Also, I see, the computer's flipped out, but,
That's me.
I was wondering if we could hear from anyone who's on Zoom. Is anyone, but now I don't see it anymore.
Go put it back up in a second. I just
Okay.
had to get my screen because I'm trying to pull my email up at the same time to get some attachments. for
Okay, so
today.
I don't know if I'm seeing everybody. I see 4 names. Does anyone from the 4 that I see want to chime in, public comment, non-agenda items? I see Nori's name, and maybe Dave, did you have a comment, or are you just videoing?
I'd like to agree with Neil about, we've been talking a lot in this forum about design styles, and I feel that with all the rules coming from California, they're going to overbuild the town and override our local ordinances. It won't really matter what style things are built in. Once we overbuild the town, we've overbuilt the town.
Okay, thank you. It is obviously a matter of grave concern. And Nori is with us, I assume. I don't know if Nori has any. I mean, let's move on to announcements, sorry. And then I thought we'd get announcements from Nori, from the staff, and around the table. Brandon, do you have any announcements? Do you want to start?
I did want to just let the steering committee know that you have some additional materials on the dais for you today. Some of those were provided by the Carmel Preservation Association. And we will, obviously we'll address those when they come to do the presentation, but it was 3 items in total. It is this 1-pager right here. It's a printed version of their PowerPoint. Mm-hmm. And, I'm sorry, there's 4 actually. There's Carmel Preservation Summary of Design Guideline Points and Acceptable Roof Styles. So 4 documents in total. You also should have had the agenda, and we're working on printing the outline for the design traditions update, but I think you all have that. So with that, that's all I have for you this morning. Thank you.
Thank you, Brandon. Nori, any announcements?
No announcements other than that. I can only be on here for about 20 minutes. And so keep that in mind if you wanted me to give that overview of the outline. Otherwise, I've given some notes to Brandon that he could do it instead if
Okay.
you don't get to it before I have to leave.
Okay, thank you for that. That's very helpful. All right, let's go around the room real quick about from the dais. Anyone have anything to comment about in general or about last night? Everyone was in attendance except Melanie, so it might be helpful to fill her in a little bit here in public and the public who might be listening in. Thoughts? Okay, Marianne, I see.
Yeah, I think it would be useful to have.
I'm not sure it's on.
Is it on? Okay.
Okay.
I think it would be useful to just recap to make sure that we all understood the direction of the council, you know, in the same manner, because I think we were all, that was the ask that we had, that we got, that we also listened to what the intent was for our committee. And I got specific how I read it, and I don't know if you want to comment how you read it. But I felt that the council was pretty clear that it was not set up the way I think, Victoria, you had initially envisioned a committee or a legislative body, as you called it, to function. But I think it was very direct yesterday that they set us up as almost like an expert panel to advise staff and Nori Winter, or to assist staff and Nori Winter, and not the other way around, and for us to report directly to the city council. That's what I got out of their discussion. So I wanted to sort of put a finish line to that particular discussion, if possible.
Okay. Anyone else have any thoughts on that one? No comments at all? Well, the only thing I can say to that is that Doug and I did draft that charter, which was not rejected by the city. In fact, I found it a somewhat chaotic meeting. So I don't know. I'm very pleased to see that we got a landscape ordinance. That was, to me, a major victory. I wasn't that clear, as you seem to be, about any direction, except that the charter was not disputed or voted on it one way or the other, which was odd to me.
Yeah, but isn't that charter a little bit in conflict with what they said last night?
I honestly, I'm a little bit at a loss personally. I accept that we had 3 asks, and that one of them was enthusiastically embraced.
Which one was that?
The landscape ordinance.
Thank you.
But yeah, I mean, the answer, if you're asking my opinion, is I don't really know. But I don't know how other folks interpreted it.
Madam Chair, I'm not going to speak to the committee members' interpretations, but I may offer that if we're going to have an actual conversation about the outcome of the council meeting, you may want to put that as an agenda item in the future, because I think there might be people that would want to participate in that conversation.
I think that's a good point. And also, again, it's just an announcement period here. So I don't know if any other people have announcements that have to do with either the meeting last night or anything else. Well, since we were talking about paperwork, I have an announcement. There's 3 pieces of paper on your dais that are just the action items from our last 2 steering committee meetings, and the a possible worksheet that we can look at when it comes to organizing our discussion later today. And I wanted to, of course, as a normal announcement, remind everyone of the website repository that we have of documents, and to thank the CPA for helping. They had spent a lot of time putting together a searchable version of the design guidelines, both commercial and residential, which we haven't had for 20 years. So that was very kind of them to supply that to that web page as well, which is just, again, the same public document that we all have access to, but just in a different format. Okay, so now we are on to what we could do here is, because of what Nori's comment was, go ahead and receive his, this is a flipping of the agenda, but I hate to go to 4 when he is pressed for time. Are folks open to moving 5 up so he can weigh in? Yes. Do I see a yes around? Okay, great. Nori, thank you for warning us.
Thanks, and I do sound froggy. I'm still recovering from the virus that's been going around, so that may abbreviate my comments without my control here necessarily. But you had asked if I could give an overview of some of the highlights of the outline that we're working with for the residential design guidelines. And I will be getting you the commercial one soon. There is, of course, a high-level outline for the commercial guidelines in the strategy paper. And we're fleshing that out with more detail at the moment. But in terms of a preview of its organization, that was established in the strategy paper, since, of course, the downtown guidelines didn't have much structure and didn't have much detail. We went ahead and had inserted a high-level outline in the strategy paper. The outline for the residential guidelines builds on the existing documents. That was always the intent, sliding in new material as necessary, and then editing existing guidelines as necessarily. Particularly, again, as the strategy paper points out, and as you all have commented throughout the meetings, to add extra strength and emphasis for some of the guidelines. And so, for example, in many cases, should is changing to shall, or at least in some other form, added emphasis is being provided for existing guidelines, either by adding more detail of what's appropriate or inappropriate, and of course by adding in more photographs. We in the strategy paper showed mock-ups of a couple of examples of how that will happen. In some cases there will be an entire page with a grid of photographs that shows a range of examples, rather than in the current guidelines. In many cases there may only be one image to illustrate a guideline. And you've asked that there be more positive examples, a range provided where it's appropriate, and then also some negative examples. So that's a sort of overall objective in the outline. The document is organized into basically 4 sections. The first one is all introductory material. And I would say about half of that is existing material, some of which is to be edited, some deleted because it's out of date. For example, the current concept phase residential guidelines have diagrams and text describing different review tracks. And those have certainly changed and are likely to change again. And those are being cut back to a briefer description, an overview of process, with the expectation that there will be a separate, more detailed description of the different tracks and thresholds for review. The new pieces for section 1 to point out to you is one called Using This Document. And that gets into a little bit more detail about how people are to use it from the public and the property owners and their professional consultants, as well as the staff and the city's boards and commissions. And it also has a section explaining some of the key terms. And this is something that you asked for early on. And that is, a definition of that shall means shall, and should means it's expected that you comply. But in any case, there are some of the key terms that have to do with compliance are being added there. The other section that is new follows that, and that is the relationship to other policies and regulations. And staff are helping to develop that. That's giving an update of discussion of how this does relate to the general plan and other city documents, such as the climate change documents, etc. So that's some of the new material that's being added into section 1. The The other key part then is, again, something that you've asked for and that the community asked for, and that is this discussion of the key characteristics that are valued. And of course, that was a topic of discussion in the earlier workshop. And at present in the outline is the text as it appeared in that initial workshop. We have a lot of feedback from the workshop, and I know you'll want to be working on editing some of those as well. But the intent is to now have that embedded in the document itself. Also being added on, and if you're following, I should have been referencing page numbers. I believe if your printout is the same as mine, it would be page 7. A discussion about what does context mean and how is that used in considering appropriateness. And again, that's something that you've asked for. Following that is a discussion of the history of development, a brief one now, because of course there are much more extensive histories, particularly in the historic context statement that the city has, and this material is drawn from that, but cut down. And that is to explain the sort of the evolution of annexation and the traditional development patterns that have occurred in the city, so that people get an understanding of why there may be some slight variations in some of the neighborhoods from others, and also just the idea of how evolution and change has occurred over time. That then is supplemented with a sampling of Carmel styles, and that it will be brief, but the intent is again to introduce the range of designs that have occurred over the years and to highlight what some of the key characteristics are of each of those styles, so that people can appreciate them, and if indeed they want to design in a way that is referencing one of the earlier styles, that they would have some information on how to do that with some authenticity. So that series, that section helps to set up that understanding of the history and the range of diversity that exists in the city. Section 2, which begins on my page 9, is the what is now the separate book of concept level design guidelines. But what we've done there is inserted the guiding principles. And again, this set that's in the outline is the version from the workshop, and we will be editing that with some of the comments from the workshop findings, and certainly we'll be looking to your edits as well. But the intent here is, rather than having that in the introduction, which could run the risk of being overlooked or not taken as regulatory material, we're inserting it into the concept phase guidelines as the first section, so that it's very clear that meeting those guiding principles is expected. Following that then is the current sequence of subcategories for the guidelines, the neighborhood-wide level and site design level, etc. And so for a lot of this, as I mentioned earlier, the changes are adding emphasis, in some cases adding some supplemental text, and in particular adding more contemporary photographs. But by and large, the guidelines themselves, at least the underlying ideas behind them, are the same as are in the current document. There are some areas that I might just, I've tried to in the commentary in the outline indicate where there's something new coming, or that we're basically editing the existing guidelines, but a couple of them maybe to draw attention to are on my page 13. One is about garage encroachment. While there is a little bit of a discussion about that in the current guidelines, we certainly heard from you and the community that more specific criteria for when encroachment is appropriate should be provided. And so we're expanding that discussion. And following that similarly is the discussion about the progression of spaces. And while that is in the existing guidelines, we certainly heard a lot more about this in the workshops. And so we're expanding that both in terms of text and in terms of examples of that layering effect of the foreground for the architecture. And there are others that are being expanded. One, an area that you had identified was what is here, Section 7, privacy, views, light, and air. Again, that is already in the guidelines, but we're expanding the text and adding more visual examples there. And then I'm just looking to see if there's anything else in that section to highlight. When getting into building design, more illustrations and discussion about mass and scale and proportion of buildings. We certainly have learned a lot from the workshop and the handbook analyses of the different examples that people commented on. And some of that is in a summary of the workshop observations that we've already written up and have given to Brandon. I'm not sure if that's been distributed to you yet, but we also are digging down into a lot of the individual comments, but learning a lot about when the different variations of mass and scale and materials interface and window ratios, et cetera, how they interface in terms of people feeling buildings fit in appropriately. So we're adding more of that discussion there. Then Section 3 is the existing document of the final design detail level. And again, primarily here, it's adding more examples and in some cases, more emphasis on text. And we are adding in, you'll notice, some references to some of the forthcoming regulations such as ADUs, and that'll have to be ironed out, of course, but that is being addressed here in this final design section for building design and for garages. And then the last section of that is the final phase, landscape design. And again, more illustrations primarily are being added there. A lot of the emphasis about that filtering and layering in the foreground is in the concept level, but we'll be looking at the interplay here to see if there's additional detail that needs to be added in this section as well. The fourth section is really a placeholder, and we need to discuss, we'll want to discuss that with you at a later stage, and that is to what extent should there actually be appendices or not, or just references to other documents rather than embedding them in the actual publication. These days, it's less beneficial to just insert appendices, particularly of other information, rather than just to provide links to it. But that's something I think as the rest of the document evolves, we'll get a better understanding, and we can talk that over with you in terms of if something needs to go there, if a glossary is useful at all, or if it's better just to embed definitions throughout the document as those terms are appearing. So anyway, that's a placeholder for potential supplemental material. So that's the overview of the outline, and as you review it, I hope that'll help you understand where we're trying to go with it.
Extremely helpful. Thank you so much, Nori. And I'm just doing a time check. You said 20 minutes. How many minutes do we have before we lose you?
About 2.
Okay, so then I'm going to very quickly ask the group here if they have any quick follow-up questions for you before we lose you. Mary Ann's leaning forward.
Yeah, Norian, you may want to come back to us with that, but I am interested in, so what I heard yesterday, and please correct me if that's wrong, that the council would, I thought directed us that they want to write a housing ordinance, but that they prefer to have you finish this project first, 1.5, and then they would revise it again or have an appendix, I don't know how that's being handled, for the new housing ordinance. How would you go about doing that? Incorporating that, or would you then go ahead and revise this 1.5 document again?
Well, I think we can anticipate, I think we talked about this, I think a little bit at an earlier meeting. At a very high level, the principles of massing and compatibility, we will be writing in the guidelines, particularly thinking about downtown, regardless of how many floors or what the height might be, so that the guidelines will already be able to address variation in mass and scale and compatibility of scale at the street level, regardless of where the housing component goes. And there will be, at a high level, some cross-referencing to those anticipated documents or policies. So that already, we'll try to do our best to write it such that if updates are needed, they'll be minimal. And it will be pretty easy to go in then and add any other specific references or an additional illustration, for example, that might be needed. So we will write it at this stage of the game, anticipating that that's going to be following shortly after.
And Nori, just to follow up real quick on that exact point, it was similar to what I was going to ask. You had mentioned at the last meeting that you felt there was a need for a bulk plane illustration of some type, that you had been working on residential and you'd been working on, I think you said I don't know if you said you had already started it, but that's the type of diagram you're talking about, it sounds like. Is that right?
Yes, those diagrams will be in there, working with the current height limits. Yes.
Should we allocate a special, I don't know, place on a future agenda so that the public can weigh in on their thoughts on, the downtown shape, the shape of the downtown for that?
I think they certainly could. We, what we're relying on is the responses to the models that were presented in the first workshop, which showed variation in massing, and we got some pretty clear guidance in terms of what people thought was appropriate. And upper floors, massing showing to the maximum height at the moment was included, and whether or not, again, that's 2 or 3 floors, that massing model is the same. Okay. So we can review that material, because we're certainly planning on using those graphics, the ones that scored well, if you will, or that had good public support. So we can, when we get to that point, we can have a special session with you to look at that particular section of the guidelines, both the text and the suggested graphics. And if there's a need for a supplemental graphic, we can generate that as well.
Okay, perfect. And then how about on this side? Oh, Melanie, do you have any questions? I'll go in order. Really. This side? Yeah. Questions for Nori? Okay. We're trying to keep you on schedule, Nori.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
And that reminds me, the schedule that we got yesterday about your general work, it was sort of an update to the council, and they forwarded it to us. It sounds like there may be some slippage, and I wondered if, and I just want to clarify this for the whole public, that without the landscape ordinance addition, we were already like 3 months behind, it sounds like, because last time we spoke, we were at March, and now we're at June with no changes. Is that your understanding also? And maybe you could speak to that real quick. What happened?
Yeah, for a variety. Sorry.
Sorry, I know it's like,
For a variety of reasons, including the fact that I've been out of commission for the past 2 weeks, we did slow down, and part of it was, adding in the analysis of online workshop materials and the time that it's taken us to learn from that, all of which has been very beneficial, of course. But for a variety of reasons, we are running slower, and unfortunately, then hitting the holiday season, that even slows down the process as well. But I think now we're going to be getting you those drafts by the end of the year here, and we should be able to stay on this schedule as it's been published.
okay, thank you. I just wanted to make sure I understood that correctly, that it was truly without any changes that the council made last night, and we'll let you go. We'll have to figure out how to incorporate all that, obviously, in the schedule.
Okay.
Staff will do that.
All right.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nori. Good to
Thanks,
see you.
Lori.
Okay, so that was sort of a deviation from the schedule, but obviously really important. But I think we should take a quick look at the schedule and just see how we want to proceed now. I'm not so sure that we want, it's up to the group, but do we want to immediately now go into the outline, or do we want to, for example, even consider the CPA presentation or go back to this minutes discussion? Does everyone have an instinct about that? I mean, one of the thoughts I had is that if things come up from their presentation that might influence our discussion, we might want to flip it, but I'm just looking for. Go to the presentation?
I agree.
Is that
Yeah.
without objections from the group? Yeah? You're okay with that, Don? Okay. Is that okay with the CPA? Putting you on the spot? Okay. Thank you. All right. Come on up. All right.
Okay, so this way is forward, I assume? All right. Thank you for hearing us and giving us the ability to present to you. We appreciate that tremendously. Your handouts, I'll just go over a little bit. We'll also provide these via email to Nori, so he'll have them. Initially, of course, what you have is the presentation itself as a handout, so you don't have to worry about anything that you see on the screen there. You have a copy. Also, because we're limited in time, and we've been trying to keep it down to 10-minute presentation, however, we haven't succeeded yet, but we're trying. This piece of paper is really important because in going through the strategy paper and the
A
design.
little more light, thank you. Sorry to interrupt you, Carol. I can't
That's
see what
okay.
you're referring to because the light. Yeah, that's great.
Okay. In going through the strategy paper and the design guidelines, we made comments about what we saw, kind of the main points, and so we have a thumbs up for those things we delightedly agree with, and some other comments that maybe clarifications, different things we wanted to consider, more detail, et cetera, better definitions, et cetera, and some other factors. So that's what this piece of paper is. It's an extension of our presentation because we didn't have time to really go through it, but it is important. And then we just threw in acceptable roof types. Janice got this on the internet, and we thought maybe it would help you in the process looking at different roof types and tops, just to, give you more discriminating ideas about that. So that's your handout. So let me move on to this slide. What I really want to stress in this slide is that, as you know, we have close to 900 people who have signed a petition saying we want to keep Carmel traditional. This includes both residents and visitors to Carmel. And we also have a steering committee of about 11 people, and it represents also leaders from the CRA and leaders from Carmel Cares who have given us their input on a regular basis, and this presentation and handouts are based on all of their input as well. And what I'd like to say is we don't see it as really personal preference in terms of house styles and designs as much as what is Carmel and what is best for Carmel and what keeps Carmel viable, what keeps people coming to Carmel and spending money in Carmel, and what keeps our residents enjoying Carmel and attracted to Carmel. So that's where we are, and we try and get our egos out of all of that and look at what the big goal, what is best for Carmel. We know that it is unique and that it is a draw and that it is special, and we know that our visitors in particular come and say, we really are upset with what's happening in the last few years with what we see in the housing styles, and we thought Carmel was different. We thought they could fight this and have for several decades until maybe recently. Another point that came up as we were reading through is the terms neighborhood and village, and we like to pair neighborhood and village for the very reason that we want to see Carmel as a unit in a sense, or as a way of being a kind of character, old world charm, whatever you want to call it, that pervades all of Carmel, not just one neighborhood versus another neighborhood. Yes, there are neighborhood differences, we realize, but those are subtle differences generally. So we like to think of neighborhood and village as kind of a unit. Next, I'm going to ask Janice to come up and give her talk about the rest of a few slides anyway. There we go.
Here. Is it this one?
It's that one.
Good morning, I'm Janice Bradner. I'm a 23-year resident of Carmel, and I wanted to talk a little bit about some of the tenets within the design guidelines. Thank you, Brandon. The design guidelines emphasize diversity in architecture, and we really need to recognize that within the traditional style, there's actually a lot of diversity. And when we see that in our current environment, we have a blend of Tudor, Craftsman, Spanish, and other traditional styles. And we all agree that the design should not be cookie cutter, and that each homeowner should be given the opportunity to explore options. But those options should be within the confines of the desired architectural styles. I think most of us agree that modern styles, in the right setting, are beautiful. But the majority of us feel that Carmel is not that setting. Boxy industrial architecture plopped into the middle of a quaint traditional neighborhood is in conflict with the desire to have homes blend in with the urban forest. The design guidelines use the term simple lines as a desirable architectural attribute, but the most intriguing houses in Carmel are not the result of simple lines. The tuck box or Hansel and Gretel are examples of how the flowing lines create visual interest that wouldn't exist in a boxy type of structure. The design guidelines discourage building fairy tale cottages, but those are the structures that the visitors come to see when they come to Carmel. The design guidelines also discourage imitating styles, but aren't most architectural designs for homes, even modern homes, inspired by previous similar styles? This example that you're seeing shows a home that was inspired by a Frank Lloyd Wright design. If there wasn't imitation in design, how would you ever be able to categorize a house as modern or traditional, Tudor or Craftsman? You can pick a traditional style home that might imitate aspects of other similar homes within that genre, but still provide unique touches that differentiate it from other homes in that genre. Neil?
Thank you. And modern and traditional architecture, our favorite subject, isn't it? Modern architecture, I recommend that you might want to get on the internet, check a little bit, go to YouTube and Why People Hate Modern Architecture. The DeGuerin study, 75% of people said they did not like modern architecture, preferred traditional. A survey was done for the federal buildings. 72% of people said they did not want to see modern architecture in federal buildings. There is a popular dislike of modern architecture. I just wanted to make us aware of that. This portion here is, I remember Nuri talking about delineating the aspects of the various different styles. We're starting to do that here. This is a work in progress. And see here, now this is done in encouraged and discouraged. Encouraged, wooden, stone, or authentic appearing roofing materials, wood or authentic appearing window frames, sills, and molding. Discouraged, stressed functionality over form is encouraged. You know, there's that form follows function debate in architecture. Modern goes to, thank you, Brandon. Pure form says we're not going to do anything but exactly what is needed for the function of that element. That's not so human. Human scale is it does things. So the stairway on the right is a much more human scale friendly thing, inviting. The stairway on the left is pure form and has no feeling and emotion in it. That is discouraged, in our opinion. Encouraged would be create interest and continual delight in design, detail and craftsmanship. Corners exhibit bevels, bullnoses, cornices, and moldings. Discouraged, simple exteriors with large undivided glass panes.
Uh-oh. What happened?
Thanks for the help with the...
Hold on, we're losing... Oh, there we go.
Yeah, I have problems with equipment. Simple exterior, discouraged are simple exteriors with large undivided glass panes, box-like appearance, or simple rectangular structures and forms. Encouraged, Carmel stone and local granite, arched doors and windows. Discouraged, exposed structure or industrial elements, where you see this.
Click.
Yeah, baby. Oh, yeah.
What we're all seeing.
I got eye problems. Sorry. Discouraged. Well, there we go. Encouraged, wooden and or hand-carved doors. Encouraged, traditional lighting in keeping with architecture, old world lighting fixtures, amber lighting, and downward soft lighting. No motion detectors directed to the right of way. You know, when you walk down the street at night in Carmel and boom, you're getting hit with lights, if we could make sure that they don't reach out into the walkway. And the reason for amber lighting is that old idea of, remember when we had candles and kerosene lighting, and it is warm, it is red, it is golden, it's comfortable, it wraps around you. And I'm not going to go through the rest of these in the interest of time, but they are here to follow. So horizontal siding, natural versus unfinished materials, discouraged. Well, you can read all of this as we go. And let me get to the next person. Trendy designs using materials to justify modern, what I call hybrid modern. We see this in Carmel. Oh, they don't like modern? Let's put some wood on it and let's put some trees out in front of it, and then they'll like it. And let me get to the next person. There we go.
Hey, I happen to be the next person because Nancy Toomey is not here yet. She was expecting that we would be presenting later this morning.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So that's okay. So I'm just going to follow these slides. So we're going to show you a house that was approved and built that disregards 22 existing design guidelines, and it was 2021. And so this is one justification of why we need a design review board. So it happens to be on Camino Real in Carmel-by-the-Sea. So once again, we can go through 22 different this is the neighborhood here around it, 22 different design guidelines that were ignored, broken, whatever you want to call it, to okay this house. And here they all are. We may make it in 10 minutes here.
You know, you could slow down a little bit, Carol.
Okay.
I am almost reading everything, but I'm
Okay.
not that fast.
All right. And you do have it with you there, so you can
Yeah.
read it later if you
Yeah.
want. But we just went through each of the design guidelines and highlighted those things that were violated by approving this building. Now, this is a picture that takes a little more explanation. I thought it was some sort of heat pump or something, but it's actually a view of the house and the landscaping on the lot from above. And once again, the landscaping is not what we are all recommending in terms of landscaping. Please note there are many more houses just like this one that have been approved, recently approved, that do not follow the existing design guidelines. And here are some of them. But it goes on and on and on. Let's not forget the unanimously approved commercial project that brought many of us here to begin with. This is what started the Carmel Preservation Association, was realizing that the Del Dono project was approved unanimously by our Planning Commission. So we knew that the people had to speak up. As a matter of fact, people were speaking up a lot, and we realized that we needed representation. The residents, in particular, needed representation. So concluding recommendations are that we reinstate the Design Review Board in some form or other, that we rework the design guidelines to require traditional designs. Thank you very much.
Thank you, all of you, for that presentation. I'm very grateful that you took the time to organize this so clearly and to present such, good illustrations and everything. And I just want to ask my colleagues here if they have any questions of the group before we move on. Yes, Melanie?
I don't have any questions. I think it's...
Are you on the mic?
Yeah, I am, I think.
Okay.
Maybe I'm just not on top of it. Yeah, I'm on. I want to thank you all very much for your presentation and all this hard work. It's very valuable, very, very valuable to us to have your comments, and especially your overhead presentation and giving us a copy of that, to take with us.
Thank you, Melanie and Victoria. We also wanted to say if you want any of the pictures to present, we have those that we can send you, and you can utilize those, or any other help that we can provide you. We are here.
Thank you so much. Okay, so yes, come on up. Yeah, comment, any other comment or questions from the public. Come on up.
As an aside, I hope that we'll take a little quiet time sometime today to remember what the date is and the impact on our country on December 7th.
Yeah.
It's kind of important to some of the older generation. You're too young. I'm sorry, Don.
Thank you, Ken.
As you have on the wall behind you, back in the 20s, the public got together and they said, we're going to have something that we believe in. Where we want the city to go. And there it is. It's behind you. This sheet is kind of the same thing for the design and the general plan. It should be the prequel, it should be in front of the design study policies, the general plan. So I hope you'll retain that and include it. It has a very succinct explanation of what the public wanted to see in their design of buildings at the time. I'd also like to encourage you, to look carefully at a design review committee, the benefits, and I would suggest that if the hair director of the planning department shakes when he sees another committee being added, I would say combine it with the Historical Preservation Committee and just have one committee and let them do their job. The Design Review Board saves a lot of time of people coming to the Planning Commission with attorneys. You can resolve a lot of problems during that particular time. And finally, anybody recognize this book?
Yes.
Good for you. Good for you. I'm going to buy some of these if I can find them and put them in the planning department. You need to leaf through this book because it's filled with pictures of what Carmel wants to see in a village in a forest. And it's right in front of you. You can't miss a thing. Hey, and one more thing. I want to compliment the planning department under the leader of the great Brandon, because what he's doing is he's got so many balls in the air. He's got a new staff. He's got to train. He's got you to babysit and work with. He's got the council, and he's got the public that comes in once in a while and isn't too complimentary. So I want to compliment you what you're doing.
Thank you, Ken. Yes, more comments from the public.
Good morning. My name is Sherry McCarty, and I live at Dolores and First for 44 years. And I'm here to support Carol and Neil in all of their efforts to bring attention to the fact that Carmel is being lost. I've seen so many changes in the years that I've been here, and I think that Carmel is always promoted in tourist books as Carmel and the fairy tale houses of Carmel. Well, can you imagine if you're looking for a fairy tale house in Carmel and you stumble across these huge architectural masterpieces that are putting in with glass and wood and no flowers, no gates, no little pane windows. So I encourage you, and I don't think there's a moment to lose, to bring it to the attention of the building department and the design review board, hopefully in the future, to promote and support the Carmel-by-the-Sea that we all have grown to know and love. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sherry. Anyone else interested in commenting on this? Okay, I'm going to look at the screen for a moment. Does anyone joining us in Zoom land have any comments on the presentation that we just received? Okay, I don't see any action. Oh wait, I do see action.
I have one quick one. I'm going to just post to the chat a blog post I saw on the Carmel presentation website, and maybe Carol and Neil, you could speak to it a little bit. It's a post that says, "Where do you draw the line?" And it actually names the 3 Henry Hill houses on Lopez and talks highly of them and how they were built in the Bay tradition and fit well into the town. And so I'd just like to get your viewpoint on where do you draw the line where some of these modernist homes, it feels like you are supportive of, yet the traditionalist only view that I thought I just heard would seem to ban such homes from Carmel.
Does anyone from the group want to respond to that? We're casual here.
It was a question too.
Could I interrupt you? I think we're getting into dangerous territory here if we start letting the audience debate each other.
Oh, okay, I thought we
I
could.
think there's a forum for if they want to contact each other outside of our meetings.
I'd be interested in that answer, frankly.
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't aware of that blog post, but I do think it's an important question. I don't know if.
I would like a response.
Okay, should we take a quick vote? Who wants to hear? I'm serious. I don't want to be the person to decide if we want to have the group respond. So we've got Doug.
It's not really a debate I'm asking for. I just was looking for
It's
clarity.
just a question. I know. Melanie, would you like to hear or not hear?
Yeah, that's fine
Here?
with me.
It's you're the tiebreaker. Do you want to hear the response from the group?
Sure.
Yes, okay. Sorry, Doug. Okay, could someone from the group answer Dave's question? Where do you draw the line in modernism?
Could you clarify that a little bit, Dave? I'm sorry, I was talking to somebody at the first part of your question. Clarifying the line between modern and...
Yeah, can you folks hear me?
Diana Moore's head.
Sorry about that. Can you folks hear me?
Yes, Dave, sorry, go ahead.
Okay.
So, no, I just posted a blog post, a link to a blog post that's on your website where it says something about charm, where do you draw the line? And in that,
Diana.
I apologize, someone keeps calling me while I'm speaking.
It's okay.
So in that blog post, it actually talks about the 3 Henry Hill houses on Lopez Avenue and how they're built in the Bay tradition from here and how they fit into Carmel charm, even though they're not traditional. But the presentation I just heard sounded like it's traditional, non-traditional, boom. And so I just want to understand some clarity about, is it really traditional only? Or based on that blog post and other things I've heard, is some modernism that you feel fits within the town?
No, I think the Carmel Preservation Association has made clear that we are for no modern style architecture. I don't think that we've changed that position. The reason is when you let some in and everybody wants modern. So if there is a tiny little crack in the guidelines that says you can do modern, everybody's going to use that crack because that's what wealthy people of status want when they design a home. I know, I work for some of them. And so if we leave any gap at all, that gap will be exploited to the maximum, which is why and we thought about this a lot. We did not come down with this kind of a firmness about it until we realized without it, it would not work.
Okay, I think we have the answer. Thank you. I agree with Doug. Let's not get too in the weeds. Does that answer your question, Dave?
Yeah, I'm still confused by the blog post, but which didn't say that.
Right. I think we may have to hold different concepts in our minds at the same time.
That's fine. So I've sent it to the chat. Maybe everyone could take a read when they have a chance.
Thank you for your participation, Dave. Anyone else have any comments before we close this item? Okay. All right. Thank you very much. I still don't see any comments. Let's now move on to not dealer's choice. Choice of the, I don't want to choose. We have 2 other items. Well, we have 3 other items. We have the future agenda items. We can go back now to the outline, or we can talk, I think it's a briefer discussion, check in on these minutes, these action items. Let's get the minutes out of the way. Everyone agree with that? I'm looking around. Nobody's objecting. Okay. What do you need? This is just my own notes.
I know, but can I have a copy of that?
Which?
What you have on top that you've been referring to, this thing here?
Yeah, this is just my own notes for myself.
Okay.
Sorry.
Okay.
I can bring you my notes in the future.
Something that I didn't have.
No, that's not a real thing. That's just me. Okay, so we have, I just brought with us, I think it's my understanding we don't actually have other minutes other than these action items that Doug and I have been producing.
Yeah, Madam Chair, we do. Catherine has been diligent about writing them. I have been remiss in cleaning them up and getting them in a form that was publishable.
Okay.
I've got now three meetings worth of minutes stacked up. So our next meeting, I will be bringing 4 sets for this group. I know, I'm sorry. I'm very sorry.
No worries.
It's totally on me, not on anybody else.
No worries. I just wanted to make sure, it occurred to me as we keep putting this minute approval item on but we really haven't had minutes, and I just want to make sure that people understand that Doug and I are not trying to take complete minutes of the meeting. We are just trying to keep track of our action items. But because we do have these action items, I thought it would be just a quick, use that spot in the agenda to see how we're doing on the action items, since, again, these are not minutes. So, for example, we did go to council. This was something we assigned ourselves last meeting, and that we can sort of check off from the 18 November. If you look
Where
at
are you exactly?
Sorry, these 2.
Yes, I have them, but
so if you look
the first one says committee business, or which
committee business.
heading are you? Mm-hmm.
Committee business. So chair, this is 1, 2, 3, 4. It's like the 5th one down. Chair to work with staff on an agenda item for the December council meeting. So if you guys would just take a quick look, and chair, this was me, to produce a doodle poll for more advanced schedule. That did not work out. some predicted that that might not work out, and they were right. I'm happy to not, this is item 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 on the bullet points. So unless, I'd like the folks to weigh in, do they want us to persist in trying to schedule through doodle polls, or should we just, I'm happy to just go off Mary Ann's schedule. But
I don't know if I'm dense or something, but
Yeah.
when I go to 6, it
Yeah.
says sequence in which to address each affected
Oh, you're on
document.
the action items from the prior meeting.
So where?
What meeting are we?
It's go to 18 November 2022.
Okay,
So we're going backwards in order.
Yeah, because I think, Madam Chair, I think you guys
I
actually
don't know
already
where.
adopted or accepted those ones from the 3rd.
Yes, this is not, again, these are not truly minutes. These are things we assigned ourselves. I want to make sure that we're keeping up with what we want to do and our priorities remain the same. This is so the doodle poll thing, I just want to check in with folks. Do they want us to pursue the doodle poll approach? I assume not.
It's
That was
fine
kind of
with me.
difficult. I never heard from Don on the doodle poll.
I think you did, but no, I found it very confusing.
Confusing.
Very difficult.
Yeah.
Madam Chair, perhaps you and I can just work together and do the old analog style of
Yeah.
reaching out to folks and finding the best date.
I think that's possible, and I
Okay.
think, Mary Ann, you really need to drive the schedule if, because we know that your time slots are very specific. So
If I
that's-
have a long enough, if I have a couple months heads up, then I can actually organize my schedule around it.
When we go to the future agenda items, let's talk about schedule, if that's okay with everyone. We've talked again, checked in with Nori Winter about the bulk plane studies. He's affirmed that now. We got the outlines. There's a number of things that are moving forward as we had requested. The critical path diagram, I'm not sure, Brandon, if, there was a new schedule that we got. I don't know if that helps produce that, or...
Well, I would offer that one of the reasons for the critical path diagram, if I recall that you asked for, Madam Chair, was if the steering committee was going to explore some of those additional documents, and I think we heard last night from City Council that's not something they're interested in this committee doing at this point. So I think the schedule is the schedule as adopted by the professional services agreement. So that what I put together are sort of the milestones for the project.
And what about the landscape ordinance and how that fits in?
Yeah, so we're going to, if you recall, staff will be going back to City Council. They said February. I'm going to try to get it there earlier. I'm going to try to go in January if we can move quickly on this, because I think it is really important to get started on that. But that will be, once we have approval from City Council on a contract, then we can actually start getting the schedule. But my rough estimate is it's going to be in that January, February, March timeline that we're working on it. That's what I presented last night.
Melanie, are you catching this? Because I know you weren't able to attend. So Brandon's explaining the way that the landscape ordinance process is going to fit in. But we'll catch you up later if that's probably not enough to fully grasp.
I can meet with you afterwards, Melanie.
Okay.
And give you a heads up.
Anyone else see anything that we feel like we had thought was urgent, haven't gotten to, want to reassert? And we can also cover that in future items. But I just wanted you all to look at this. I feel strange about approving it in a way since it's really not minutes, but we can.
Well, I think either eliminate the comment that they're minutes.
Melanie, can you make sure to speak into your microphone so
I'm
that
sorry.
the Zoom people can hear you?
Yeah, I think that it can be resolved by just not saying that they're necessarily minutes.
Yeah,
But-
that doesn't say they're minutes, but
Yeah,
for inclusion, we've been
Yeah,
waiting
yeah,
for the
yeah, but
minutes,
it- okay.
So
It
it'll
was
be
just on the
included.
agenda. Yeah, if we could get these minutes,
Yeah, absolutely.
I think that would be really helpful.
Absolutely. Yeah.
No, I agree. Thank you, Brandon.
Yeah. No, I'm sorry. No thank you is necessary because I've let you guys down. I should have had those for this meeting, but that's on me.
I do think it would be helpful going through this document. I'm sorry, you started on page 2, right? Or I
Oh,
had the pages
sorry.
reversed or
Yeah,
something.
just the date,
So,
yeah. Just these are the only
If we could start
two.
with committee business and then just go through this quickly, I think that would be very
You want to
helpful.
do that? Okay. So, we started where we're going back in time. We've kind of gone through now the the first group of committee business. The only thing we haven't touched on is direction of staff to provide remaining city offices related to a future landscape ordinance, including species. So that, I assume, might be forthcoming now, that they've approved that, that action at the
What was
council
item?
level.
Could you read it again? I'm not looking at it.
Sorry. Oh, I'm sorry.
So I don't know if I got a copy.
Did you not
what
get a
handed
copy
out
of
to
that?
everybody.
Maybe you guys can share? Okay, I'm
Okay.
sorry. Too many pieces of paper. So it says, direction to staff to provide any remaining city documents related to a future landscape ordinance, including any plant species information. So just
Yeah, so when
anything related.
Exactly. So when I'm assuming that this committee, and when we talk about future agenda items, one of our very next meetings hopefully will be focusing on landscaping. And so those documents would be germane to that meeting, and they would go out ahead of that meeting, like we did with the outline, giving you time to go through those ahead of the meeting.
So that one we hadn't touched on. The last one, we again just on this committee business that says acceptance of winter consulting offer to provide bulk plan studies as pertains to maximum downtown envelope for housing. It was reiterated again by Nori that he's interested in doing that. I would just add that I think the public should weigh in on this. I felt like what I heard at the council meeting last night was people really, and even today, piping up about this. The word, I think Councilmember Ferlito is correct. It is a source of anxiety in the public to imagine this influx. And so I would like the public to have an opportunity to explain for everybody's benefit what it is that they treasure about the current streetscape and what they want to preserve about the current streetscape. I think that when we had, I know Nori was referring to this one exercise about downtown buildings that was done, but I don't believe that folks were putting two and two together. I wasn't. I will speak for myself that that was a housing exercise, or that could apply to this influx of housing. So, and I'm not sure if anyone even remembers what I'm talking about or what Nori was referring to, but I think I have in my mind an illustration of one exercise during all those. So I just want to make sure there's clarity on that people understand we're talking about trying to accommodate the arena numbers. So that's a suggestion that's just, since it's on the list here, that I'm going to bring forward, if it's, well, maybe we'll just cover it now for a future agenda item. Is everyone okay with that? Looking around, I see some nods, yeah? Okay, so even though that's item 7 today, I'm going to.
Yeah, and Madam Chair, I believe Nori actually said that. He said once we develop that part, we're working on the timeline on that professional service agreement now, as council gave us direction last night. When we get to that part of the guidelines and the zoning code being written, it will come. We're going to plan on presenting it to the committee and the public.
Okay. So let's talk about timing for that at some point, Brandon. You'll just let me know. It has to do again with this sort of. I mean, maybe it's not the critical path, but some kind of sense of what happens when. Mm-hmm. At a slightly, not a macro level, but it's not a micro level, but somewhere in between. Upcoming agenda items, workshop on the landscape ordinance. I think we now have a different structure for that because the council has decided exactly the timing of how that's going to work, and then we'll plug in where that's necessary. Again, any thoughts on that? Does that make sense from those of us who were there? We're going to talk about the outline for item 2, second bullet there. And then we had the CPA presentation to get today. Someone requested, maybe it was us, the retention strategies for existing residential and commercial buildings. I think that's something to get back to. Noting that. Any comments on any of this page besides? Marianne, go ahead.
No, I was trying to figure out where does you and Doug drafted a charter that we as a group couldn't talk about, and it was yesterday not really discussed either. So since this is the only time we can talk about it, would you just tell us what you what you drafted?
I think it was in the council packet.
Yes, it was.
That's the only place it showed up in public.
Yeah.
But I don't. I can pull it up. I didn't bring it with me, but let me see if I can. Or Doug, you don't have it handy, do you? Maybe he does.
Well, I guess while you're pulling that up, maybe if I could offer, just because I'm going to dare to tip my toe in here a little bit. And you tell me, Madam Chair, if you want me to shut up, but I will, and I will if you do. But I do recall last night there was a little bit of discussion about the charter that was prepared by the chair and the vice chair. At least one, maybe two of the council members said that, because the asks were up on the screen. They were listed 1 through 6, and the first one was a mission statement. And I thought what I heard from the council was that the mission statement is effectively the professional services agreement with Norway, the schedule that we're under. So I took away from that they kind of said, no, thank you. The ask from the council is to create a mission statement for this group. They said, no, thank you. We already have that. It's the project. So
That's like, I mean, I think
that's what
that
I
is,
kind of took away from it.
I think that is one valid interpretation
Yeah.
of what happened. I really do. I think it was a confusing meeting, in my opinion. Our topic was not as confusing as the police station topic, but I understood there to be a debate between that viewpoint and others on the council saying that they thought folks were confused that this was a mission statement about the project instead of about the steering committee. And once that comment was made, the discussion sort of evaporated. That was my recollection of what happened. So I'm left not knowing who understands what about that. And there was no action taken. And because there was no action taken, I think just legally, we just have nothing. We have our own putting forward of this statement that we would like to operate under, and we have no action either way from the council. That's, I think, the legal kind of, we just have discussion to talk about and how different people had different thoughts and people tried to clarify, and does that sound right?
Yeah, I thought I heard clear direction, but I would really like to have Dawn and Doug, because you were there, weigh in on that, because since, we can't talk to each other off record, so I would like to know, to put that to rest, basically.
I agree with it. It was very confusing and conclusive.
Wait, there's your mic on?
I think so. Confusing and inconclusive is my estimation of that subject.
Yeah. Doug, how about you?
I think we have cascading levels of guidance here. We have the agreement with Norway, which is the preeminent document, and then we have what we're working on or we think our role is. And the council didn't put their imprimatur on it one way or another. They sort of discussed it, two of them, and then passed it on. So I think we're left with, do we want to be guided by that document? I mean, we haven't adopted it either. At the last meeting, we authorized the chair to prepare certain documents for the council packet, and that was one of them that went forward.
So then my question is, what do you want to do with it?
That's a good question, Marianne. Well, why don't we, it's a very short document. Do you want to read it over, or you want to have Doug read it into the mic?
Madam Chair, I'm going to insert myself. I think if you guys are going to debate the merits of an actual mission statement for this group, that probably would need to be an agendized item for anybody that would want to come from the public and participate. Because you're going to be taking action on something, you should have that on your agenda, I would offer.
This does remind me, Brandon, that you and I both have been remiss in remembering to put on the agenda sort of the miscellany category of anything relevant, because, as the public knows, as we all have come to understand, the Brown Act is sometimes not doing the public's business in public is something all of us believe in, but if it prevents us from doing our work, it's quite cumbersome, and it does not serve the public. So we had intended to remember to put a general topic thing, and I'm trying to think in what way does this...
Well, we were supposed to approve minutes which we don't have. So now we are talking about our own notes instead of the minutes.
That's
and
right.
I think as part of that, we should be able to talk about something that we, at the last meeting, asked the chair to do. The chair went ahead and presented it, but now I think we need to bring,
I think you're right,
bring
Marianne.
that to a conclusion.
I think that is the justification that we were going to discuss minutes, which we have in part here. So it would be nice if the public could see what this
Could I
document is.
offer a motion here first?
Yes, go ahead.
What if we approve the action item minutes of November 3rd and November 18th and get them off the table?
Well, I think Marianne had expressed a desire to catch up and see how we're doing on
Right, but I don't think that eliminates
those.
us doing that.
Yeah, we can continue to discuss them after they're approved.
Yeah.
I don't know are you
Yeah.
comfortable with that, Marianne? This is just, he's talking about, but I'm not even sure we need to approve them, actually.
Okay.
This is, I guess, what I'm saying, is that until we have actual minutes, that these are supposed to be included in, they're more of a prop for discussion. So let's make sure the public knows this charter, Melanie.
Yeah, I'm going to pull it up.
Okay, good.
This is the only copy we have.
That's the only copy we have. Yep.
We can probably make some quick copies of it.
Yeah, could we? That would be helpful.
Yeah, but also on the screen is super helpful, and then we can at least show everybody what we're talking about, including ourselves. Because the first time the committee here could see it was when the council saw it, which is, again, the Brown Act protocol.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you, Brandon. Yay. Okay. So shall I? I'll just quickly review this. So that it has a few. Oops. Let me.
I think it's the duties section, you know.
The
I think
duties
everything
section?
else is
Okay.
pretty clear, right? It's really the duties section where we basically is the operational part of it.
Oh, that's good. Thanks, Brandon. Right. So let's focus on that then. So the duty. Where are you going, Brandon? Okay. Okay. Good. Now it's big. Okay. Thank you. So duty number 1: work with the city's consultant in the development, evolution, drafting, review, presentation, and city council adoption of new residential and commercial design guidelines, amendments to the Muni Code, general plan or local coastal plan, and other related documents that may pertain to the guidelines. That's number 1. Number 2: work with the city planning staff. Well,
Can I take it one? Oh.
Yeah, let me just make sure everyone sees this and hears it out in the community. Work with the city planning staff in the writing, editing, review, and presentation of the design guidelines. 3, initiate the study and research, drafting, and editing, presentation, and adoption by the city council of plans, programs, policies, regulations, and ordinance arising from the committee's work effort on the design guidelines. These efforts may include, but are not limited to, work on a landscape ordinance related to community design of private and public properties, and the design implications of development related to housing efforts, and similar work as it arises. Those are the 3. It's again, a very general document. This is the most specific part about it, I suppose. Go ahead, Marianne, tell us your comments on whichever part you'd like.
I'm interested to know how staff envisions that the flow of information will work. So I think there were a couple instances where we had small items that are of big interest to us. For example, that bulk plane study that I heard for the first time in the public presentation workshop, where it would have been great to have a discussion ahead of time. And so that's really my main interest, is the flow of information, and when would we, because also I think scheduling our meetings should be scheduled so that we get information ahead of time, in time, so we can all have time to get prepared, and then the committee meetings, I think, are the most productive.
So I can answer that. I think we've kind of been dancing around today the format for how that might work. Like, take the landscaping, for example, we just talked about. We know that landscaping is going to be an item that's important to everyone and is important, and we're going to be working, the city's going to be working to select a contractor, a landscape architect to work with us in drafting those guidelines. And so we're going to have a steering committee meeting at some point in the next couple of months to talk about landscaping. And so I think what we should do is these items where staff and Nori need feedback from the steering committee on items to keep our timeline moving under that professional services agreement, we're going to send that information to you ahead of time. Like you just said, like the landscaping information will all come ahead of time, or bulk plane. One of the things when we start actually writing the bulk plane section, we'll come in and have a conversation with the steering committee and the public about what that looks like. So that's kind of how I see that working. And I think that will be the best benefit, because then we can get the feedback from this committee as we're working, staff and Nori drafting these sections of the guidelines to keep on that schedule, but getting the feedback early on these high level topics. And so one of the things that would be a benefit to staff out of this committee is identifying those things that the committee feels strongly about wanting to weigh in on. I mean, I've been taking some notes today. Bulk plane's a big one, landscaping. So if there's other key elements that the committee wants to make sure that they're early input on as sort of like milestone items, then we can make sure we bring that information ahead of time as well. Can I answer your question?
Yes.
Okay.
Anyone else have comments on this one-page charter, I guess, that they didn't get to see in advance?
It's very clear to me.
Okay.
Yeah, it looks good.
Looks good.
Thank you both for doing it.
Mostly Doug. Thank you, Doug. Okay, so then we do have a question before us. Since we don't feel that we have clarity, at least the majority of the committee doesn't feel they have clarity. Melanie wasn't there.
Yeah.
Marianne, it seems that you feel as though you saw, similar to Brandon, a kind of, I don't know, direction that this isn't relevant or something, or that we should refer to the document that's the contract for the consultant to determine our role. And then we have the majority over here saying, no, it seemed really just confusing, and there was some discussion on that side and there was some discussion on the other side, and then they dropped it. Which means, to me, my view is that we should simply assume that this, unless Melanie says it looks good, I don't know how you feel, Marianne, Dawn, I think said it looked good, so unless there are major objections, I think we should think that this at least represents our understanding of our role. Whether we get to play that role or not is maybe not up to us in the end. But I think this language is not that confining. It's simply, we're going to be working on these things and trying to help and see where it goes. But I would recommend that we adopt it if there are no objections, or we take a vote if there is a difference of opinion.
Madam Chair?
I would, yes.
I have no objection to the language, but I think it's a thin line we're drawing between our minutes and this document and being able to act on them today. I think there's a bold chain of demarcation in the Brown Act.
Okay.
Because this isn't on our agenda.
Okay.
I don't think there's any harm in postponing it to our next meeting.
Okay.
To put it on so the public has a chance to review it and comment in better stuff.
Thank you for the city management hat. I appreciate it. I'm not a parliamentarian, so I need reminders, and I really appreciate it. Is that okay with folks to put it on to the next agenda?
Can I just?
Yes, Melanie, into the mic, yes.
Can I just make one comment? Doug, is this okay? If I just make a comment in general about the drift of this, because it really does impact what we're going to be doing the rest of the day, as well as what we're going to do next week. So do you think I can just make a comment about that? Or not?
I mean, it could, but we've been operating for 8 months without it.
Yeah.
So 1 more month, reviewing the outline.
Yeah. Well, no, that's not a problem for me, but I just want to, thank you all for doing this, and just to say, as a matter of our work for the next month or certain weeks or month, that I don't know what we're supposed to be doing if we don't do what's in this duties list.
Well,
and I'm not going to it just makes it extremely difficult for us if we don't have a clear understanding about what.
Melanie,
our
can you
role
speak
is.
into your microphone? Sorry to
Yeah,
interrupt.
it makes it very difficult, excuse me, for us if we don't have a clear understanding of what we're supposed to be doing. Like, if we're not going to meet again for a month, or maybe next week, or whatever, what I'm going to be doing, how much time I'm going to devote, if I don't think that what's in this duties definition is what we're supposed to be doing. I mean, it's getting to be rather frustrating.
I hear your frustration. I know it's frustrating. And it's been a struggle, and it's been, we hoped this would resolve it. We hoped that the council would be clear in their direction. The majority of us think they were not. And I believe that's just where we are. I don't know how else to do it but to gear up and present it to council and see what they do. That we cannot discuss it with the group, as a group with them outside of the council meeting. And the idea, we could do it again in January at their January meeting, but I mean, it seems like.
Well, then we can't keep to a schedule.
Right.
You know,
I know.
I mean, this gets to be month after month a bit much.
Marianne?
It may help to put it forward just again in a very clear manner what you intended to do, rather than just including like a letter to the council or something like that, rather than just putting this on the agenda as a document to adopt, because maybe, at least from what I heard Karen say, I don't know that she was very clear on what they were supposed to do with the document or why they were supposed to adopt it. So I think if it was accompanied by a clear statement what your goals are for this document, how it would change our operation compared to how we are operating now, that may be helpful.
I think it'd have to go on their agenda as a meeting item. Doug?
And can I ask Brandon a question?
Yes, please.
The ad hoc committee has a mission statement.
That's correct.
What's the origin of that?
The ad hoc committee you mean the housing ad hoc committee?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. They drafted that mission statement in coordination with staff and then brought it forward at their next meeting, and then we shared it with city council at a meeting.
So they just shared it.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what we did.
And is there a reason that wasn't done with this committee?
There's no reason.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, that sounds like the protocol they followed. Go ahead, Melanie.
Yeah, I think Mary Ann's correct. I think that we should draft a letter, and I think we should tell them that be very candid. Just say there's confusion about what the council's direction is, and that we find it extremely difficult to work as a group, not knowing that what we have here is exactly what they envision us to do. And then, ask them to resolve it.
Would they then write their own version? Is that what we're asking them to do?
I don't know. We just ask them to, ask them if they, what their point of view was at the council meeting. Just say, we just don't clearly understand where the council is coming from. And maybe it's just a matter of clarification and them understanding that we see this as a problem to our, related to our proper functioning and the time schedule that Nori's on, and we're supposed to be abiding by too. I don't know. I'm just, I just throw up my hands.
Throw up your hands. Okay, Marianne, did you have another comment?
Yeah, I mean, they appointed us, so I'm sure they had some idea of what we were supposed to do. So that's all. That's just a clarification.
I have a contrarian point of view.
What did you say?
We sent this to the council and they didn't act on it.
Yeah.
So I think we ought to just continue. This is our guiding principle. We'll operate under it. The other part of it is you may not want to ask. You may not like the answer.
Yeah, I mean, I think if the answer is an answer you don't want, then we will have another existential question in front of us, which is whether we want to continue on as a committee. If this is a charter that we like, and that seems to represent our understand what we should be doing as 5 human beings who signed on to this task under a certain understanding, if this is what we like, and we're willing to operate under these principles, as it sounds like we would be, now that you've gotten a chance to see them and have them on the screen, then I think if we think this is an agreement that we have, then we can continue on as a committee under this. If, and I'm not saying this would happen, but if we got a different set of principles from the council, if we asked them to draft something up, since they did not do it at the beginning, and they, unlike the ad hoc committee, which seems to have done it for themselves and shared it, and then that was it, they moved on. If we get a defined charter that's different, we will then have to, and that's fine with me, meet and decide whether that charter is a charter we want to work under. Does that sound right to everybody?
Yeah, I believe, I mean, we didn't have any chance to discuss it, and
Yes.
I frankly believe it says initiate the study and research, drafting and editing, but first of all, we didn't initiate, and if we now, for the new parts, like the landscape ordinance, or if we then get housing tacked on, would actually be the ones that are initiating the study and research. That is not how we are currently operating, and I don't know that I personally would have the time. I mean, I'd have to think about that. I have the time and availability to really commit to such a big task. So I also saw myself initially not being at all versed in public policy, basically, more
Procedures.
as like an sort of expert opinion, basically, that staff and Nori can draw on, on our expertise, as in my case, architect, or, in your case, public policy, rather than me or us being the ones initiating, writing, and researching these things. I think that's a very big task. And if that is what the City Council intended, then I have to think about it, and I think it warrants our discussion, because that's a really big deal, and it's not what we're doing right now.
I agree with that. Is there, I think we do have a question before us, which is that we did initiate, for example, the idea of adding a landscape ordinance. You initiated that, and I think you're drawing a distinction between that action, which we successfully got the council to adopt as part of this process, and other things that are coming from other directions. I think that none of this document is meant to require that we do every single thing. It is a scope of possible things, including initiating a landscape ordinance.
But there it adds drafting and editing. I mean, us drafting. Are we really prepared to draft the documents?
I have no expertise in drafting a landscape ordinance, but these are possible actions that can come and go for wherever our expertise falls. I don't want to argue for this one way or another, but I think that I believe the intention of this language was to basically say we use our judgment, like, gosh, we need a landscape ordinance to have the flexibility to, opine and recommend as necessary. If that means drafting some language here or there, if it means editing something here or there, if it means initiating an action to council like we did last night, I don't think it means you do every single thing, because then that would be in conflict with the contract. It's a sort of scope of possible actions, but maybe that is phrased, maybe that's something that needs to be rephrased.
I think so. I think if it's a possible action, it's very different than it reads right now. It reads like a determination. We initiate study, research, draft, and edit. I mean, that's a big deal. I wouldn't know how to draft an ordinance.
Right,
so.
me neither. So maybe it's simply just it's like a legal term. It's like duties shall include, possibly include, as opposed to we're going to be doing every single one of those things. That's probably a little bit misleading in terms of the vocabulary.
Since there was a consensus to bring this back at the next meeting, why don't I get some comments and redraft and put in the packet?
So how do we get those comments outside of this meeting?
Send to Brandon.
Send comments to Brandon?
Yeah.
I don't know if we're allowed to do that. Are we allowed to do that?
Yeah, go ahead and send them to me.
Yeah.
But then, and you can get them to Doug?
That's at least a good first start, and then I can work on the best way to get those to Doug. But if they come to me, then they're all in one place, and then,
Okay.
yeah.
All right, we don't want to have an offline discussion. That's the problem, we're trying to avoid. Okay. All right, point well taken, Marianne. Any other thoughts on this before we move on? Okay. So I'm glad we looked at the action items. Trying to see if there's anything else that leaps out to me. Yeah, we heard that we have the design review board mentioned again by the group today, and it's also still floating on our list here from the November 3rd meeting, the very last item. That springs to mind.
Can I say something
yes,
to
go
that?
ahead,
I
Marianne.
thought that was an excellent idea to combine it with I dropped the name of the committee.
Historic Resources Board.
Yeah.
Okay, well, let's come back to that for future agenda items. Okay, now let's move on. We are about, halfway through. Let's move on to the big item of the day, which was this outline review. Unfortunately, we've lost Nori, but I'm very happy that he was able to give us that overview. And pardon? Julie. Oh, Julie's on.
She has.
Oh,
She is.
okay. Thank you. We can only see one thing at a time on our computer screens, unfortunately. We already have too much on our desks now. But thanks for putting the folks back up there. Oh, no, you can't put them back up. But Julie's here. I don't know who else is there. There was only a handful of folks. Sorry to the folks in the Zoom room that I can't. Oh, now I see you for a moment. Okay, so we still have Dave, Julie, someone on iPhone named Carol, and someone named Stefan. Okay, so I had a suggestion, but it's completely up to my colleagues here, and we'll take a vote if necessary, of a way to organize our discussion so that we don't. It is again an overwhelming document, and we had a hard time with the structure of how to review the strategy paper. So it occurred to me that since we've talked a lot about these organizing principles, or I think guiding principles was the term used, and they are kind of the big picture of what we hope that the public and an applicant would actually understand about the town before they embark on a project, that Nori has presented in his outline. It was page 9, as he mentioned just now in his presentation. And I just put those items on the right-hand column of a worksheet. And then that should be in front of you. Brandon should have one too. And on the left-hand column is what we have now as chapter headings and the organizing principles. And this committee had made a comment a long time ago, maybe, that, and I guess this is also a question for Brandon. We haven't had a conversation yet about I assume it's going to be an electronic document, obviously, and it's going to be hyperlinked and linked to other documents. But same thing with these chapter headings, I imagine, that they will be things you can just see the table of contents, click on a chapter heading,
Right.
get to
It'll
that.
work like our zoning code does.
Work like the zoning
Yeah.
code, which is very searchable,
Yeah.
which is nice.
Yeah.
And that actually begs one more question of you, Brandon. Is the plan to have, a principle that shows up in the design guidelines be hyperlinked to the same principle in the zoning code, things like that?
Where it's appropriate, I mean, we'll look at where those connections would be helpful for someone navigating the zoning code and design guidelines. I think as we get farther down the road and we see the two documents side by side, there may be parts where it's helpful to link. If there's a reference in the zoning code that says, this shall be consistent with the design guidelines section 9.1, I would assume we would make that a hyperlink, and then it would kick you over if you wanted to see it.
Both directions, hyperlink,
Sure.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a tough part about the job the Planning Commission has, is they're trying to look at everything that has to do with roofs, for example. And there's stuff in the zoning code, there's stuff in the general plan probably, there's stuff certainly in the design guidelines, and it's hard. I don't even know technically how those things could be mutually searchable, or if you'd always have to go and search, there is a general plan and I better search that too. It would be nice if everything was searchable in some kind of really metaverse type of way, but we'll see. So you guys decide, but it occurred to me that it might be useful to focus our discussion, because an outline is an organizing document. It's a document that of course has content, and we saw that, like 20 pages of content, and also shows the big picture stuff that Nori explained just now about how Section 1 does this, Section 2 does this, et cetera. And the big principles that we have been talking about with the public for half a year are very important to that, and how we would organize our understanding of what needs to be done for any project. So here are the principles that he mentioned. They're on the right-hand column, and on the left-hand column is what the design guidelines have now as organizing concepts. So that is one possible way. And one of the reason I was inspired to sort of simplify and focus our discussion is that I think this group, you tell me if I'm wrong, really likes to talk things over. And if we just line by line go through things, it's like each person is just inputting their information and then trying to write it down and keep track of it. And then we take turns doing that. And it's not as much taking advantage of our ability to sit here together and discuss. So that was the inspiration for this worksheet, to focus our talk. But you all decide. I'm totally fine with the idea of doing this the way that we did the strategy paper also. And again, this is not something we could discuss in advance amongst the group, so I'm going to just introduce this item 5 with that question to you, and then
Madam
we're going to
Chair,
take it out to the public.
Could I add a little bit to your
Sure.
intro, if that's okay?
Sure.
Because ultimately, like we discussed, staff and Nori are working on this outline, and we're trying to now, with the direction last night, really trying to stick to our schedule. So there's some things that are very important to us to get direction on, because what you have in front of you, as the chair rightly pointed out, is just an outline. This is not a document that's being adopted. This is not the regulatory document. This isn't the final draft of anything. This isn't even really the first draft of anything. This is a structural document.
Right.
So for us, some of the big things we would like to hear from the steering committee is, are there any sections or concepts that are missing? So we sent this out almost 2 weeks ago, so hopefully everyone had a chance to go through. Are there any concepts that are missing? This is an outline of what it's going to look like in the residential design guidelines. We're not as interested, I shouldn't say it that way. It won't be as helpful to try and wordsmith language that's in here at this point. The wordsmithing will come when we actually do the red lines to the actual design guidelines. That's when we're going to get in the nuts and bolts of what the language actually says. So this is more, the more helpful information for us on this outline is going to be is if there's concepts missing, organizing principles, as the chair pointed out so eloquently, and this is a very helpful document. Are there organizing principles that maybe need to be reshaped a little bit, or are we missing an organizing principle? So more high-level things that maybe are missing or need to be recharacterized a little bit in the outline, not necessarily how it's worded. So for what it's worth, I just wanted to add that in there because I think that'll also make the use of everybody's time more productive.
So that sounds like a plug for not line item commenting, but again, I want to make sure that the committee weighs in what their preference is for the handling of this meeting and this discussion about the outline. And then I want to take it out to the public for any comments about the outline. So any thoughts about this worksheet exercise versus a sort of page by page, or I'm going to look at the boys on the left first.
I'm awaiting the specific text later. I find it very difficult with an outline to react, whereas I'm sure we'll all have reactions when we see the text.
The draft of the actual,
yes.
yeah.
Well, Don, when you saw the outline, and sorry, I'm gonna insert myself a little bit because we're trying to get. Was there anything like when you saw like a glaring omission, or this seemed to capture in your estimation?
Wait, before, sorry, Brandon, but
Yeah.
before we go into that discussion, I just want to get a sense of how we want to handle the discussion first, and then take it out to the public. But then we'll come back to you, Brandon. So you are saying it's difficult for you to delve in page by page on the.
Save our energy for the future.
Keep the powder dry. Okay, Doug, your thoughts on how to handle this discussion and how to comment on the draft, whether or not this worksheet is useful, or whether you want to sort of delve in page by page or do a little bit of both? A little bit of both. Okay, that's the boys. On the girls.
I agree with Doug.
A little bit of both. Mary Ann?
What does that mean? And maybe you said it in the beginning or when I was just out, but how do you envision this discussion to tie into the feedback that we're supposed to give to this paper?
That's a good question. I think that what Brandon just said, what Nori, one of the reasons I asked Nori to give an overview of how the document is structured and how, what major changes he would has in terms of the content, was that I wanted to set up this discussion at the level of an outline. That's my preference, is that we get our discussion amongst the body at a high level of how is the document organized. That's what an outline generally purports to do. It ties into Don's comment that if he was supposed to comment on the minutia of an actual drafted document, maybe that's the time to do that. But an outline is more of a structural document. Nori outlined, he reviewed how it's a 4-part document. It's organized. He made a point to say that this information that's from page 9 is also the beginning of the substantive part, which is part 2 of the outline, part 1 being a procedures chapter. I think if we stayed at the structural level, but with Doug's caveat that if something glaring has come up to you about a content item and you want to, it's glaring enough that it has to do with whether a section should be included or not included, rather than a draft regulation type of review. Maybe what I'll do is, before you all, Doug has weighed in, Don has weighed in, if the gals on the right want to pause, we could take it out for public comment and hear what they have to say real quick. Any public comment on the outline review that we're about to do? And I'll go ahead, Carol.
Well, since last night a lot of focus was on the landscape design, I feel a need for some clarity about all of that and how it would work in reality. And I'm looking at the outline here, and it says natural paving materials, plant selection, native, drought tolerant, fire resistant, and of course the tree canopy, which we already have a Forest and Beach Commission that gives us, I guess, a lot of guidance in that. So we have, and we have a forester here. I'm trying to determine what a landscape person would be doing. Would he be telling people you have to plant ceanothus, or you know,
So,
how
Carol,
does that work out?
I think it's a super important question. I'm not sure it relates to the outline discussion and how we're going to do the outline. It's true that there is a landscape portion coming up, but
That's
we might
too
discuss,
detailed for this outline.
We might discuss where that should be in the structure of the paper. But the details, I don't think we know them yet because the landscape ordinance is now pending.
Okay, so I thought that
But
might
stay
work in here,
tuned,
but
stay
yeah.
tuned for that, for sure.
Okay.
Anyone else on the outline and the?
Nancy Toomey here.
Hi, Nancy.
Just have a couple of quick comments here. I'll flip through. On page 3, and maybe this is too detailed, so put it off to the side if it is. On page 3, in their scope, it calls out R1 zone districts, and I thought this was supposed to be citywide. So again, if it's too detailed, I punt to a future time. On page 4, I don't understand what, at the end, right above the relationship to other policies and regulations, there's a comment about conditions vary, which is confusing to me. Just call out a word use thing. And then on page 7, the headline that calls out factors to distinguish one neighborhood from another, I think, as was covered in the presentation that I was supposed to be a part of earlier, we're concerned that neighborhoods, how they're dealt with in the context to the whole village. So I'm just flagging that as a concern, how that would play out in the finished goods, because the way those words are right now, it infers that there's a lot of distinguishing characteristics of neighborhoods, which we're trying to minimize at this point. And then on page 8, this is building on that same comment, the evolution of a block in Carmel, and maybe that's just all about the whole fit and context that we're trying to encourage, but this is back to, we're looking about the whole village in what we end up with, so that we're not looking pocketed in the finished product over the long haul. So there you go. Couple
Thank
quick
you, Nancy.
comments.
No, that is all relevant to the outline. Thank you.
Madam Chair, can I just clarify for Nancy?
Yes.
Because Nancy, these are just the residential design guidelines out. So this
So was there a decision, was there a decision to do separate?
commercial will be their own, yeah.
Okay,
So you have,
I thought we were doing it all together.
no, there's going to be 2 sets. There's the residential package and then there's the commercial package. What we talked about doing one set of is all of the preliminary and final design guidelines are in one document, so that that's not confusing anymore. But you'll have your own commercial and your own residential. Yep.
All right, thank you.
Any comments from the Zoom room on the outline before we get back to that? The dwindling Zoom room. Thank you for sticking around, Julie and Dave. Okay, seeing none. Over on my right, any thoughts about the combo proposal that we work on the worksheet of the general organizing principles, and also any glaring structural or other sort of missing pieces, as Brandon referred to? Marianne?
I just go along. I don't quite know what you're intending to do, but I'll just
The question is, are we going to handle this the way we handled the strategy paper, which took quite a bit of time, and go page by page? Or are we going to have more of a loose discussion to try to get our focus on something that is more sort of organizing about this document, which obviously I'm showing my preference. I would like to keep it at a high level, organizing structural, but it's totally up to you all. Melanie, you're quiet. You're uncharacteristically quiet.
For once, I don't know what to say. I think there's a lot of things in here that are good and easy to understand, but we've gotten this, and there's so much in here that it's really a bit much to handle. I mean, all I can say is that what the document says, at least half of the time, is, well, we're going to use some of the existing, and then we're going to do some edits, and we're going to add some new stuff. Well, you know, I thought the purpose of this exercise, this outline from Nori, was to relate to the dilemma and concerns that we had at the last meeting regarding the strategy plan, and how we were going to address the strategy plan. It's in the minutes that that's supposed to be an upcoming thing to do. And as I've said before, for me personally, it's very difficult to do our work if we don't see the strategy plan as something we can work with, and if it doesn't totally reflect our comments and our concerns, basically because it goes back to these milestones and it goes back to the scheduling. And I think we just get further behind now that we've gotten CPA's wonderful presentation and their materials, which we can refer to. I think that it is really important for us to deal with the strategy plan, which are in the minutes, which we didn't go over. On the 18th, we said a reconciliation of strategy paper input with received guidelines, design guidelines, draft outline, and so.
Let's try to do that, Melanie. I mean, I think that all I'm talking about is structuring the discussion.
Yeah.
I think we should give it a stab, and please, in your mind, as you're giving your comments, think of it as a corrective to the things that have not come along the way you'd like them to come along. That's absolutely part of it. This is not a content discussion. This is sort of just, are we going to discuss freely, or are we just going to each download our comments? And so I would like to discuss freely since we have so little time together.
Absolutely. I think absolutely we have to discuss as much around this dais as possible. And we have such a limited time. That's why I suggested more meetings, because I just feel like we're never getting caught up. I feel like, you know, we've got so many important things that are out there hanging, and we say we're going to do it, we're going to do it. And yet we land up with a meeting like this where all of this discussion is fine, except it's not the discussion on the really germane things that we have to crank out.
Let's get to it. Marianne, you ready to get to it?
Yeah, I also wanted to say, Melanie, that I think that we're past the strategy paper that has been adopted by the council, and I think we just that's what it is. And I think this is the next step, this outline. So I think it's a good time for us to give input, and the real work really begins, as Dawn said, when we see what's written. So in the actual final text.
So let's do this. Let's do the hybrid model that Doug suggested, and that Brandon also asked for, where we just take a high-level look right now at how the main part of the guidelines is organized, which currently is organized as you see on the left. And I'm going to read this for the public. It's very quick. There are 11 items now in the design guidelines, if you imagine them combined. In fact, they're numbered as if they were combined. Preserving the forest character, neighborhood street character guidelines, topography, open space site coverage and setbacks, privacy views, light and air, parking and access, building mass and scale, building form, guidelines for building design final details, landscape guidelines, fences, walls, and lighting. That is how the document is currently organized. Now we have a new, Nori has taken to heart a constant refrain that we have had in this committee, which is that we would like there to be memorable phrases rather than just topics that help people understand the guiding principles, he's called it, possibly the organizing principles of how we think about whether a project is good or not good enough. And he has them outlined on page 9 of the outline. Number 1 is maintain a healthy forest character. 2 is enhance the forest in all improvement projects. 3, keep it modest. This is about buildings. 4, respect historic precedents. 5, fit with context. 6, pay attention to detail. And 7, encourage a compatible diversity in design. Now, I would like folks to, first of all, make general comments about, or just let's have a general discussion about how we feel that the document itself fits with these principles, either the chapter headings or the principles. What is our feeling about those two groups of phrases and words as ways to understand a large design guideline that the public will be, often seeing for the first time? An applicant who wants to weigh in. Mary Ann's like, I am not going first this time.
Can you just explain why we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 on the left side and why we have 1.1, 1.2, 1.3 on the right side?
That is just taking it right cut and paste from the two documents. So currently there's a 1.0 somewhere that says, these are the principles, these are the key principles. And so it's just the way it shows up in the outline.
It's just a formatting
It's
thing.
a formatting.
Yes, I wouldn't get too hung up on the numbers.
Yeah.
There's a list of 11 principles on the left, and there's a list of 7 principles on the right.
Yeah.
Basically.
So it would read like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 if we wanted to compare apples to apples.
Sure. Yeah.
Okay.
The chair is right. I mean, it's from page 9, and there's going to be 1.0 is going to be sort of like a long statement of the guiding principles, why they exist, what they're there for, and then it'll list them. So 1.0 is a section that explains the guiding principles, and everything below that, 1.1, 1.2, are the principles. So it's just a numbering formatting thing.
Don't get caught up in that. Look after the point, after the decimal.
Yeah, I'm trying to find out how the right column relates to the left column.
We're going to decide that now.
Oh.
Yeah, so that's sort of the question, if I could help paraphrase a little bit.
Yes.
So what you have in the left-hand column are the organizing or guiding principles from the guidelines that we have currently in the city that have been adopted for 20 plus years.
Right.
What you have on the right is the proposed sort of reconfiguration of those organizing principles. And so I think the question at hand is there anything missing? Is there something that should have been added? Was there something that was omitted from that original column on the left? That's sort of the question I think at hand is what do you think about the new list of principles?
And I would say it's like a twofold question in the sense that we have a content issue just about these principles. Are they capturing the content we want? Are there enough of them? Are there too many of them? Then we have an organizational question. How do these principles organize, or do they organize, the flow of information that comes to the applicant from here? For example, would one click on healthy forest character and go to chapter 1? This kind of question. So we have a twofold question which has to do with the principles themselves. Are they capturing what we've heard over the last several months and our own views, or are they, do they need work a little bit right now? And let's have that discussion. Then we can divide that into another topic, which is how should we then use those principles to help people access information in the documents they'll be provided. So why don't we just start, don't look at the left-hand column. Why don't we just start with the first two, which are both about the forest, maintain a healthy forest character, and enhance the forest in all improvement projects. I don't see, and I would say in terms of things that are not about buildings entirely, it's principle point 1, point 2, and point 5. Those 3 principles are about the context that buildings are put in, whether it's the forest or the topography or your neighbor's buildings. So we might think of those as a little subgroup. Do we think that the forest this description of the forest principle, or the sentence, the two sentences, maintain a healthy forest character, and 2, enhance the forest in all improvement projects. Do those two capture what we want to say about the forest in our guiding principles? Do we want to say more? Do we want to consolidate? Do we want to say less?
Victoria?
Yes, Melanie.
I think there should be some wording someplace in here about more of an emphasis than we have on restoring the forest, because the last number of years the forest has been in such a dire strait. It really is disheartening in many areas of town to see that our major trees, our defining trees, are being cut down, and then there's nothing replacing them. And this isn't something that just started, but this has been ongoing over some time. So I would think that,
So you're an applicant. What phrase would be best get to your concern? Because again, this is not a public works work list. It's an applicant comes with a project. They're given the design guidelines, and you want them to help restore the forest in their project. Is that right?
Right. Well,
okay.
Yeah, just an overall understanding that at a community level, this is what we expect, and this, for their site and their neighborhood, to be cognizant of the forest and to promote the restoration of the forest.
So if you look at point 2, enhance the forest in all improvement projects, would you change that to restore and enhance?
Yeah, I would do both, because so many, I just think of the new development in and around our area. And the trees are being cut down, so all we have is a view of the street. And we have, when you look up in the sky, you don't see those beautiful trees and the canopy that we used to have. So more emphasis on people planting replacement trees, both the city and the applicants.
So again, yeah, okay. So, but the city, this is for at least this part. Maybe this does raise a question of. We've talked often in this group whether there's a public works kind of component to this, because obviously we should be doing what we're asking applicants to do as a city. So that's a good question maybe for you, Brandon. Is there a way in which this document is different, the one that's forthcoming, in that it might also be seen as a guide for the city itself?
It should. I mean, when the city undertakes a project, whether it's improvements in the right of way or it's doing something on our own building, whatever these guidelines end up as, these are the. I mean, I make the public works department come in and get design study permits when they're putting up new signs, or we do it over the counter. We don't charge ourselves permits, but we always take a look at the design of stuff. So absolutely, these guidelines will inform ourselves too when we do work.
Okay, so I think it does say in all improvement projects right now, so that does include the city, and we can maybe have language in the front or wherever that kind of guide to the guide is that makes clear this is for the public works department and everyone else who does any projects in the city.
And possible, excuse me, just is relating to this, obviously, is just put parentheses in there when it says all projects, private and public.
Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't have to be, a long dissertation, but just those two words so that it's obvious that planning staff, of course, will know this. Planning Commission should be reminded, and it would help both the commission, I think, and staff to give a bit of a push to all of this.
I like it. So restore and enhance the forest in all improvement projects, private, public, or otherwise, I would add, and maybe like a partnership. Don?
I agree with that, because I could make a case the city itself is moving in the opposite direction.
Right, they are.
If you go along Dolores Street and look at all the tree wells that have been filled in,
Yeah,
it's
horrible.
It's scandalous.
I know, it's
And I
horrible.
spoke to a councilman about it, and his explanation was that he gets pressure from developers who don't want those trees.
We're having agreement on point 2. Anyone else want to weigh in on point 2?
Why is point 1 and point 2 two different points?
I would ask the same question, Marianne. I would think that if you do point 2, you are doing point 1. Do people agree with that? Is that what your point is, Marianne?
Yeah, I think it should be 1 point. Yeah.
Just 1 point. What do folks think? Obviously, we're going to be maintaining a healthy forest character if we execute point 2. Does that make sense? Or it could be that, there's these explanatory words under the principle. You could incorporate the explanatory words from point 1 under point 2. Is that right?
It could, yeah. I don't have any problem with that. I think that what we just said about public-private responsibility for what we're pushing for landscaping, and that includes the public right-of-way, it includes private property. I think that should be the first principle, and then these others can come afterward.
Okay. There is a structural comment, if I ever heard one. She's saying that she's just reiterating, you can correct me if I'm wrong, that the point 2 is the key and primary, and we think maybe the first. Right now, it's holding the first position as an organizing principle, and the point 1 feels like it's part of point 2 and can be incorporated below point 2, as in the sort of light font. I will add my own thought that just occurred to me between point 2 and the ones as a segue. Instead of the point 1 that's now incorporated into point 2, I would add, and let's just say this is now point 1, or it's 1, restore and enhance the forest in all improvement projects, private, public, or otherwise. There is nothing yet here, I think there's a skirting around a little bit, that says subordinate all structures to the forest.
Absolutely, yeah. Very good. It's in there someplace, but
it's not a principle yet.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Right.
subordinate all, I don't know, let's be careful about that. Subordinate all structures, all construction, all man-made construction, all human-made items. Any thoughts on that? Because that is actually a transition then to talking about buildings and other things we would build.
Yeah, you could say subordinate all built projects or something like that.
All built work,
Yeah,
maybe?
Yeah, all built work.
Built work. I mean,
Be subordinate to, subordinate all built or even just human.
Human interventions?
Yes, yeah.
I think you guys just need to decide what it is you're trying to subordinate. So maybe talk that through. Are you talking about like
Subordinating
houses and buildings?
houses.
Because when you say all built things, you could also be talking about walkways and garden walls, utilities.
I think that's right,
Yeah,
right?
So I'm not saying which one's
No, I
right. I'm just
know.
saying
No,
maybe
but-
think that way first. Like think
Yeah.
of the actual structures and things, and then you may be able to put a name on it.
In other words, we would not want anything to compete and undermine the reading of the forest.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Including fences, including walls, pathways even. I mean, pathways are modest to begin with, but you don't want them out of character. So subordinate may not be the only verb. Would there be something more to it? Like maybe subordinate to, so it would be subordinate all built work, or are there, what's the phrase? Built work, human interventions, human work, man-made human work.
So in the planning world, we have a term called the built environment.
Yeah.
I mean, you could, I don't know how you would fold that into it, but that tends to mean anything that has been put there by man,
Yeah.
essentially.
Right, which is good. So let's, I think we should do that, all built work.
All built work, okay. Subordinate all built work to the forest environment, or to the forest, to the forest character,
character, yeah.
to the forest character.
Well, a forest and native landscape, because when you're down on the dunes, for example, that little track, there's no that it wouldn't be the forest that we subordinate to, it would be the dunes, so.
So what was the phrase you used? Forest or natural?
Natural
character?
environment, yeah.
Okay. Are we talking about character? Don just says character, forest and natural character. Would that work? Of the site, of the city, of the town, of the subordinate all built work to the forest and
Natural landscape.
And natural environment.
and natural environment.
yeah.
What do you think over here on the left? Let me ask you guys a question here. Subordinate is key, absolutely. Is there any nuance to this that has to do with being compatible? In other words, you could have something super small that's not, so it's subordinate, but it competes aesthetically with the forest character. Like, I don't know, a bright red, very small, bright red something or other.
Yeah.
Now, I wouldn't want to restrict people's, creativity on their own property, but what do we think? Is there something about being compatible with the forest character, or is it
That
just
could
subordinate?
be in the building section, right?
Mm-hmm.
None.
Okay. All right, so we'll leave it as it is right now. This is, so I'm going to.
Come back to it.
We can come back. So I'm going to start right now. This is just a draft numbering, but we have decided that what was point 2 is number 1. And what has now been introduced is number 2, because it still relates to the forest. Anything?
And why don't you want to combine that? Just the forest is, everything's subordinate to the forest.
Oh, because the first one is restore and enhance the forest, which is just a project. In other words, every time you do a project, you have to work on the forest and the landscaping so that it is restored and enhanced.
And you don't want to make that just one point, the forest.
That is one
Everything's
point.
subordinate to the
Oh,
forest.
no, I personally think that's very different, because now we're talking about the man-made. When you do a man-made thing, make sure you subordinate it. And I think this goes a little bit to the modesty principle we're always talking about, so we'll come to that too. But to me, that's a totally different, sentence with a different, if I was, a different topic sentence. When you're going to do something man-made, make sure it's subordinate. What do you think, Doug?
Okay. Let me give a real-life example, because I think we're treading on some soft territory. When you were on the council, the people on Carpenter Street, north of 2nd, petitioned the council for a drainage project. The drainage was handled in the natural environment along the edge of the road in combination public property and private property. So under this definition of including natural environment, the city could not have gone in to put the drainage system in because there were trees removed. Now, the quid pro quo was the city was required to come back and put additional trees in to replace the ones they took out. But under this, that drainage project probably wouldn't have happened.
I think we should, if you're in, there will always be things we need to build that require moving plants around, I think.
Yeah, sure.
I'm not sure this is meant to preclude that.
You can
maybe
have public hearings on that, on the project. You would have public hearings on the project.
Maybe what we need to say, again, this is the question we asked ourselves a second ago, to the forest and natural environment, or the forest and natural character of the environment. Maybe that helps, that it's not that you preserve the environment exactly as is, but that you preserve the character of the environment. And then, does that make some sense? Does that help it? Is that okay with everybody?
And you could, just as a suggestion, you could put the word, sort of like the qualifying word character in front of forest, so to the character of the forest and natural environment, so it covers both of those.
Okay. All right, good.
Can we have that wording again?
Subordinate all built work to the character of the forest and natural environment. Now, in my mind, that's 1 and 2. And again, this is not set in stone. This is like preliminary sort of structural discussion. In my mind, context might be flowing from this. I'm not sure, but I throw that out there. I can see also how, I mean, a lot of this stuff is context, not a lot of it, but keep it modest kind of is, and so is respect historic precedents in some ways. And then he's got context as including design factors of the building, like building size, form, and proportion. I'm wondering if some of this should be broken out a little bit. But I do think we are talking about the context so far. It's just that we're talking only about the natural context. So maybe the next principle to discuss is something about context, and maybe several principles about context.
One thing I would just say, as organizing principles in general, that we want to keep the organizing principles terse and concise.
Yes.
And we definitely want certain things to stick out.
Mm-hmm.
And if we start combining these principles, I think they're going to lose a lot of their emphasis.
Mm-hmm.
I think these are designed this way to shock people from out of town who aren't used to the way we do things here, to put right in front of them immediately
Mm-hmm.
what we expect,
Mm-hmm.
what we stand for. And I think that if we start trying to mold some of these too much together, that we lose that particular emphasis. I don't know. It just seems to me that's extremely important to have this list. It's just like the checklist that you're going to do.
Mm-hmm.
It's a fantastic idea because it helps the staff with clarity, and it takes them out of being whipsawed by the applicants and the shalls and musts, the yes, the no's, real clear and concise for everybody. So I think
so
that
you're arguing for teasing some of this stuff apart a little bit. So fit with context is a very big statement. Fit with context, and Nori and the staff go on to talk about examples of that. But what do you all think are different types of context besides the forest, which we have now addressed in 2 principles? What other things create context that could be a standalone principle? Do you have a thought, Doug?
A guiding principle?
Yeah. So even the word fit is pretty general. Is that the right word? It might be the right word.
maybe blend.
Blend. And then what kinds of contexts are we talking about?
Well, the house that's to the left and right of you,
Mm-hmm.
so the existing built environment
Mm-hmm.
creates also context.
Absolutely.
And how much of the existing buildings? So, for example, I remember someone saying at one point, and maybe I said this back on the Planning Commission, gosh, sometimes it would be nice to see a drawing of the street.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Not just the one building, and not maybe just left and right, but what is
the
the
whole block.
character of the street? So is that an ask for the design? In other words, you've come to town. Before you come to Brandon's desk with your application, you ought to go look at your block, for example. Is that something we want to ask folks to do?
Sure.
That's a type
Yeah.
of context.
Yeah.
Okay.
They have to be cognizant of the existing, built environment.
On their street.
Yes.
Left, right, down the street, and across the street.
The whole
I
street.
mean, yes, as a guidance, what you should be doing as when you design here, but in terms of as a requirement, it just adds a tremendous amount of cost. We just want to be aware of that. So even when the requirement started of showing houses to the left and right, which I think is really good, and that's what we should be doing, but I think we should be aware that to do that properly, you have to survey it, you need to photo, I mean, it's a big, costly item to submit. So if we then have applicants to the whole street,
But maybe you don't draw the whole street.
Right.
So this is a question for us to determine now. In what way should we require folks to understand their street? Should they understand, they should present maybe left and right, which seems like it's kind of in the middle as an ask in terms of a financial ask, but they should somehow understand or photograph.
You can photograph it, yeah.
Photograph the street. So now we're talking a little bit around the edges, but it's okay. How we're defining the built context, I guess, is what we're asking. So the project should fit, should be sensitive to, should fit with, should blend with, should enhance the streetscape. Relate to the streetscape of its own block. Is that right?
Yeah,
Because there are different types. This is not exclusionary. There's that type of fit. There's a type of fit that has to do with respect for the architecture of the town in general.
Yeah.
There's the forest fit that we've already discussed. There's fit as is on this list that have to do with the lot itself, how it's shaped, and whether the building is doing a good job of. And maybe that's the next one, not the buildings. Maybe that we still have one more natural fit item to handle, which is the conditions on the lot itself, that it really be sensitive, that the building be restorative or subordinate or modest or whatever is with respect to its own site. Maybe that's the first thing, because it generally would mean more natural considerations, because either there's a building that's going to be taken down, or there is no building, or you're trying to basically preserve the nature of that site. So we're talking about fitting with the context. Is the first thing the context of the lot? We could go in order of size, like the actual lot, the property, then the street, then the sort of history of the town.
And I know it's wordsmithing, but it comes up over and over again, is that design buildings and landscape to be human scale. Our trees are not human scale. They're very tall, and buildings that tall would certainly not be human scale. So the whole language about landscape being human scale, I think that should just disappear.
Where are you seeing that here?
Under 3.
1.3.
Keep it
Keep it
modest.
Yeah, that is.
And it's also in the other document in several places.
Okay, so again, on 5, fit with the context. The 2 landscape items are context items. Is number 3, so we have so far restore and enhance the forest in all improvement projects, private, public, and otherwise. Then we have number 2, subordinate all built work to the character of forest and natural environment. 5, subordinate the project to its property, to its natural features of its property.
Does this become 3? What's 5
it would be
here?
3. It would be 3 that we're trying to figure out.
Yeah,
'Cause we wouldn't want-
to the site.
to the
just
site itself.
Say this, to the site itself,
Mm-hmm.
and then you can include the street,
Mm-hmm.
to the site and the street. So they're thinking about, too often, everyone's looking at the site
Mm-hmm.
and concentrating on the requirements we have, without taking into account necessarily how that particular building and site relate to the rest. What about the one very large lot, 3-4 lots, that's mostly in a small lot configuration on that street? I mean, I just think that, you have to look at the site, but you also have to look at the neighborhood, and And
So-
by neighborhood, I mean street.
Right, so here's the thing, with the site itself, we could, I can see us saying, you need to fit in and subordinate the building and all the man-made structures to the natural topography or to the property qualities themselves. But you can't ask, I don't think you can ask an applicant to subordinate their home to other homes. That doesn't make sense. You have to fit with other homes.
Yes.
But you don't subordinate to other homes.
but
It'd
we
be
have-
nice if
we
you
have-
did, but you don't have to.
We have fit down here, so I thought all we were doing was talking about fit within the context of
Right,
the
so that's-
site and the
So,
street.
so if you had a blank piece of property on a street that was already built, I know that's unusual, or you're planning on tearing down a decrepit thing, what would we say, how would we describe, would we say to subordinate the building to its natural setting on its property? Okay, so we think we're comfortable with the word subordinate for its own property, the qualities of the property. How would we phrase that? Subordinate.
Physical environment of the property.
The natural environment.
Yeah, natural environment.
So we
That's
have
better.
natural environment, so this is more like topography, features, maybe features of its site, natural topography
Natural
and features.
Yeah, natural.
Subordinate all projects, I'm just throwing this out here, to the natural features of, or each project to the natural features of its site. I like that. Subordinate each project to the natural features of its site. That make sense?
Yeah, Victoria, I have an appointment. I need to leave in a couple minutes. I think they were supposed to go to 11, right? Or,
Yeah, I mean, I have an
Yeah.
appointment at 12, so I have to
okay.
be,
And I have one at 11:45. So
Okay.
and I have a half hour drive.
I would imagine,
I
Madam
just
Chair, we're
have
probably
a-
going to want to continue this
yeah, we might want to
discussion
continue
Uh-huh.
it.
and then have a meeting pretty soon.
Yeah.
Keep
Yeah.
the momentum
Yeah,
going.
can we have a
I have
meeting
one
next week?
question.
Well, let's see what Marianne's,
Is
Quickly.
this fit with context? Is this supposed to what used to be number 7, building mass and scale?
I think that there's a very good question here about the fact we've never had sentences like this that we've asked Nori and the staff to put together. So the relationship is yet to be just determined, I would say.
So this is something I think would be really useful for us, for Nori to explain to us
I think
how
so,
this
too.
is, because I'm very familiar with our design guidelines, but I think, they address everything that needs to be addressed.
Yes.
So how would we know how these new principles, what carries from where to where? So.
Right.
Rather than ourselves trying to figure this out, I think it would be good if the presentation would guide us through.
And he can weigh in
through
as we
this.
go through these as well, and that's probably all the more reason to continue the conversation to
Yeah.
the next meeting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and I have one procedural question. Is something like an instruction by Nori to us, the committee, something that has to be a public forum, or can we ask to be instructed by Nori how this is supposed to work?
He can put
And a
together something
separate-
ahead of time, yeah, and we can send that out to everybody, and it'll be available to the public as well. So he can put
That's
together
what
sort of
you're
an
asking.
instruction of what
Yeah.
you're asking.
And let me
No,
take us.
I was wondering if we could have a session where we don't discuss anything, but where we just ask Nori to please walk us through this so that we are better prepared at our next meeting
Yeah.
in order to be able to
But
discuss it.
Brandon can also distribute information to us from Nori. He can take your
Yeah.
question and ask Nori and have a mail from Nori or from Brandon go to you to answer your question. That is not a Brown Act issue.
Yeah.
It's just very time consuming, and I don't know,
For
it
him to
would
answer
just,
the question, you think?
Yeah, first I have to write up all the questions, right? And I don't even know what
Oh, no, you're
questions
just
I have.
thought you
I
were
would
just
just want
asking.
him
You
to
wanna have,
walk
like, a
us through.
dialogue?
I just want
She
to.
just wants like a workshop.
Yeah,
just,
we can do that. The public just,
tutorial.
I mean, it's just a public
Yeah.
meeting. I mean,
Just
we
like
just,
a
yeah,
tutorial.
it's no problem.
Yeah,
We
a
just notice it.
tutorial is the right word,
Yeah,
exactly.
all she wants
Can
is
we have
like
a tutorial?
If the committee wants that to be the next meeting, we can notice that as the next meeting. And
So this, let me give you a stab at what I understand that Brandon is after and that Nori wants feedback on. If you have a principle number 1, enhance the forest, et cetera, anything that would serve that principle that exists in the existing guidelines would be referred to from that principle. Do you see what I mean? These are the principles we want people to walk around in their heads with, in their heads. And then you can use these principles to refer to things like this thing we just came up with, that you subordinate each project to the natural features of its own site. Then you would look for things in the guidelines that click over and support that.
so I'll give you a practical example of how, like, my staff would use the principles. So when you're working in the guidelines with an applicant and you get to a point where you have to interpret the guideline, for example, someone comes to you with a project, a feature of the project, and there's a section of the guidelines that controls height or design. If there's a disagreement or we're not really sure how to interpret it, then we'll go up to the guiding principle and find the guiding principle. And that's what we do in the zoning code too. If you notice in a zoning code, there's always a purpose statement. What is the purpose of that section? So when you're interpreting zoning code, if you get lost or you're not quite sure what's meant to be, you try to go back to the purpose statement. So that's what these guiding principles will be used practically for by staff. They're also going to be used by applicants when they come in. These will be the basis of that checklist that we're talking about
Right.
too. These are the things that you're basically, as an applicant, going to have to say, XYZ, here's how I meet all these principles.
Super important. It's super critical, and I'm enjoying this discussion, and I want to make sure, Marion, let's just, before you go, when is your next availability? Because we have to continue this meeting to another meeting.
I can't do another whole half day
Mhm.
before I have to, before I
s-
leave in January.
Right.
I'm just, but I can, we can do, if we could have one of those, I think wouldn't need more than an hour, maybe even only 45 minutes to get this tutorial from Nori, how these two relate to each other, these two columns that we have here.
Do you have any other time to work
I didn't even
on?
understand that, because at first I thought everything on this right side is now just about 1.0, and now he broke it up and has detailed information under 1.0.
Sorry, I can clarify that for you, and so can Brandon.
And so now we have 11, and then we have 7, which means some of the things are embedded on the right side under lesser categories, which is perfectly fine. But it would be just really helpful if somebody, maybe even 30 minutes, instructed us exactly how this relates to that.
When is your next availability, Marianne?
So, do you want to do that right now, or can I just?
No, I think you should
send
tell
you-
us. Tell us if you
If you
can,
can see
unless
anything,
that's
then-
too much pressure. We
Yeah.
can.
Yeah, because it's Monday, Tuesday, I'm on East Coast, Wednesday. Yeah, it's. Can I go?
And you can
and
also
just-
go Zoom us. So don't think of it as having to be here in person, even though that's preferable. And you don't have to
I
do it
could
right
do
now.
Next Wednesday, for example.
Next
First
Wednesday.
thing in the morning.
Okay.
For an hour.
Okay.
So.
Thank you.
We
Perfect.
could do it,
Yeah.
could
Perfect.
get our tutorial. I don't know, maybe nobody else needs it, but I feel
Well,
it would be
I
really
think Nori
helpful.
Nori should weigh in, and we asked him to do it today, and he can do it again. I
Yeah,
think
so
he
Wednesday the
should come back.
14th, 8:30, I'll see if Nori's available.
Okay.
And I'll send something out to the group.
Okay. And we could meet earlier if you want.
Thank you.
Do you want
I'm
to do?
sorry.
No, don't worry about it, Marianne. Can you come at 8?
Well, I have 7 o'clock Zooms pretty much every day.
Okay.
So.
8:30
So
it
we
is.
do 8:30.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then just to be, so the focus of that meeting is really just going to be to get that tutorial.
Yeah, and, next Wednesday, 8 o'clock works.
8 a.m.
8
Okay.
Or
works.
Wednesday at 8 a.m.? Okay.
Thank you, thank you, sorry.
But I'll confirm that. I got to check with Nori because I
Yeah.
don't know if he's available.
I mean,
so.
hopefully he can attend, and even maybe whatever point we're together, he can plug in
Yep.
whenever it's convenient for him.
I think, excuse me for
Mhm,
interrupting, but it's related to what we're talking about.
Mhm.
I think when we're trying to set up a meeting, like I wasn't able to be there yesterday, so I just follow up with you and Brandon about what happened.
Sure.
Anybody else wants to chime in their thoughts or concerns, can't they just send them to you and then you send them to me? I mean,
Sure, yeah, and the video, the meeting was recorded too, so you could just watch the video as well.
and what site and how?
And I can send you a link to that.
Yeah, okay,
Mhm.
that's good.
I think that is the best way to get your own view on it.
Yeah, and then, so we can facilitate meetings. It's very difficult for all of us to always be at a meeting. So I don't think we should feel guilty.
Don't feel guilty.
Or whatnot, if we can't make a meeting and we get on Zoom or on the telephone or whatever. Because the thing that's most important is at least the majority of us, get some of this stuff hammered out and move along.
Well, even though we've lost Mary Ann, I have about probably 15 more minutes. Can people stick around for 15 minutes and see if we get a little further on this?
Yeah, I can. Don, can you?
Sure.
I think we were on the brink, and this is not like any kind of final thing, but I think we're on the brink to transitioning to the streetscape. And is that worthy of its own principle that you should understand, or what would you say? Bye, guys.
Bye-bye, gals. Thank you. Thank you.
Enhance the streetscape? I mean, yeah? Go ahead, Doug.
Enhance is a good choice because if you get on Guadalupe north of 2nd, it's pretty sterile right now without upper canopy trees. So if someone came in and wanted to do a major remodel or a new house, I think you'd want them to enhance what's there now.
Yeah, and we're talking about now we've moved to built work, so we don't want to see people, is enhance the right word? Like if you're looking at your neighbors and we have a requirement of looking left and right in terms of your documentation, Mary Ann, I think wisely submits that photographs are cheap, and so at least is submitting that you are aware of your environment.
Yeah.
That's obviously not a principle, but it's a sort of an action item for an applicant. But what would you say is the architectural language, like how you fit into the streetscape? It's enhance, fit, respect the streets of your street.
Respect people, they don't respond to that positively.
Every project should enhance the streetscape?
Right. That should
the
be
existing streetscape?
Part and parcel of the whole review process and the approval process.
One thing I'd offer is that using the word enhance, it is a good word, but it does imply that the city would be requiring an applicant to do something to the streetscape. So we're adding, if you're going to develop in the city, and I'm not saying this is bad or good, that's the way I would interpret that as an applicant, is saying like the city now is asking me that I need to go outside of my project site and do something to the street.
Right, that's probably not the implication. So Brandon, feel free to chime in. We're trying to make sure that someone looks at their block and says, I see what my block is about, and I'm not going to disrupt that too much.
Did you say that wasn't the implication?
That you would, in your own site, go about then improving the whole street. Like you can't do that. You can ask an applicant, right, just in front of your.
Yeah, just in front.
But we're talking about whether your building is compatible with the other buildings on the street.
Absolutely, and but what if one street, I can kind of think of a street where, the houses have not been really well kept.
Mm-hmm.
And the streetscape is really marginal. There are numerous vehicles parked there, sometimes boats, and so it creates an environment that is totally antithetical.
Something you wouldn't want to enhance,
exactly.
follow along. Yes, that makes some sense.
So, we want the streetscape to be improved and enhanced, or however you want to say it. We want to, I think what we all want is, something that's consistent with this, buildings and landscaping that are consistent with the neighborhood. And if the neighborhood, I don't know how we say this, but if the neighborhood is
isn't
subpar,
good enough. so
that
I hear
they
you.
have to start, they can't continue this feeling of they can just ignore the streetscape.
Right, like the precedent is already bad, so we don't want them to.
Exactly.
Right.
That's what
okay,
I'm saying.
so this may call for a moment where we combine two contexts, where we say that it has to both enhance the streetscape that exists or respond to the streetscape that exists, but also further the look and feel of Carmel, overall, right? The entire town, or the guiding principles. I mean, you can't have a guiding principle that refers to guiding principles.
This has really concerned me, and I'm sure you guys have thought about this too. That we see, and the community that has spoken to us sees, that improving the right-of-way to fit in the forest context, to improve the natural environment of the site and the block. What are we going to do with the people who only see the right-of-way as their property?
Well, that's a whole other issue.
And it's their private parking lot.
Well,
this has been a problem for the 33 years that I've had my property, is that my streetscape is really foresty. But, I know others who would say, hey, look it, this is part of my property, which it isn't, but it's part of my property, and I want to park there all the time. So I think at some point we need to really confront this ourselves, and thinking about how we're going to really change this, edify people, explain, because the city has explained ad nauseum. You're not supposed to put signs that this is private property. You're not supposed to say no,
Well, Melanie, I can't agree with you more. I think that is something that's come up often. I think it may end up being in one of the organizing principles. I think perhaps it would be part of the explanation for restoring and enhancing the forest. But let's see if we can just, before we have to go, come up with and then I think we need to just continue this exercise to the next one. Marianne can go come next week. But since I don't want to leave this particular one hanging.
Right.
So every property, and just sketching this out as you guys are thinking, every property should enhance its own street and contribute to the heritage of Carmel, Carmel's heritage, architectural heritage, that kind of thing. So that we have people looking. Then under there would be requirements for the left and right drawing. It would be photographs of your street that you show you've understood it. And then also maybe that you understand Carmel and its architectural heritage. Maybe this is the place to put that in. I think it might be a combo so that people don't say, oh, I got the street. The street stinks, and I'm going to contribute to the stinky street.
Yeah, that's why I bought my property there.
So we put those two together. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Like every project, every property should enhance its own street and contribute to Carmel's architectural heritage. Yeah?
Their own street right-of-way.
Well, that's the right-of-way is a different thing, I think. But let's make sure that we have that.
Because if we don't have the right-of-way,
Carmel's built heritage or architectural heritage? Architectural heritage. Okay. I hope that this is helpful to Nori and Brandon. It sounds like it is.
Brandon, what do you think? What are you thinking?
Yeah, no, I think so. This is what I was hoping we'd get to. So, in the couple minutes we have left, so it sounds to me like the steering committee, one of the recommendations coming out of today is a bit of a reorganization of the organizing principles. So, flipping 1.2 to kind of become 1.1.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I've been tracking along with all the words, but I wasn't sure on the context thing. Is the steering committee recommending to pull the thing we just wrote out of 1.5 so it becomes its own standalone thing, or how?
Pull it out of page 9? Wait,
out of
5.
1 point, yeah.
Oh, yeah, I think we didn't finish that discussion.
Okay, that's probably why I didn't.
Yeah.
Then.
No, I think what we have is, and I actually like this, it's almost like a zoom in. You start with nature, and we're gonna, it looks like, at least the trend now is to sort of zoom in to built at a large scale and then zoom in to maybe all the details, and that reflects what this community has been saying for so long, that the forest comes first.
Absolutely.
And then you kind of work your way down to, like, did you get the doorknob right? You know?
So then it'd be more fair to say, like, the bullet that we just, that you all just wrote is essentially like another bullet under 1.5, at least right now.
I think that one, so here's what I have so far, Brandon, is that number 1, whatever it is this restore and enhance the forest.
Yep.
Number 2 is subordinate all built work to the natural environment, et cetera.
Okay.
Number 3 is subordinate each project to the natural features of its site. And there's all sorts of little sub things that are on the left that relate to topography and what have you. And then 4 is no longer about subordination, because now we're talking about being contextual. Every property should enhance, and you could say every project and property, so it's both the built part and and the natural part, should enhance its own street and contribute to Carmel's architectural heritage. Every property or every built project.
Can you type all that up and then send it out to us?
Yeah, maybe that'd be good. Yeah, and then from there, just everything remains unchanged after that. So then we pick up and keep it modest.
Yeah. So we haven't looked at keep it modest yet. Okay. We haven't looked at respect historic precedents yet. It's almost like number 4 is coming out of a part of 0.5.
Yeah.
And getting sentences that you can rely on to tell people on a single page handout and the checklist, and it all sort of ties together.
Yeah.
Well, it shows a proper flow of our priorities.
Yeah. I mean, you could have Planet Earth at the top, but we're going to, so, and maybe you do, we'll see. So we do need to continue this discussion. So let's consider, with some modifications, I don't know how this works from a Brown Act, Roberts Rules standpoint, you two over there, but we do need to continue this item to the next meeting, and then we may, if Nori's available, clarifying some
just
questions.
Just continue the hearing, don't adjourn this meeting.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then it's still the same meeting
And that's
in a
going to
week.
be next Wednesday.
Yeah.
Wednesday
will be
at
next
8 or 8:30. I'll let everybody know when I talk to Nori.
Yeah.
I'll still send out a notice. I mean, I notice things even when they've been continued and don't require a notice. I think it does the public service to do that.
And if Nori's not available at 8, we could still keep talking, and then he plugs in at 8:30 or 8:45 or whenever he's available.
To be honest, I need to look at my calendar too.
Yeah.
I don't know when I have next Wednesday.
I know.
Well, if Nori's not available, perhaps Julie is.
Right.
She's participating.
That's right.
Here.
Or Nori could brief you, Brandon, or brief another staff member who could then pass it along in public. I don't know, some way to do it, because we're so restricted with going into the holidays.
So I have one item for this and then an extra item.
Okay.
When we were meeting downstairs early on, the subject of compounds came up.
Oh, yeah.
Lot consolidation.
Yes.
That's not addressed in here.
Yeah.
In the organizing, or in the guideline outline, or are they talking about organizing?
Either place.
Okay.
And it's coming.
Yeah.
I mean, Menlo Park has it, Palo Alto has it, McCall, Idaho has it, Laguna Beach and Bluebird
You know
Canyon
what?
has it.
When we get to keep it modest, we may talk
That's
about
a
parcels
perfect
there,
spot.
right? I'm going to put it
Perfect
under
spot
there.
With keeping it modest.
Yeah.
You can't
Both
keep it
parcel
full.
size and bill work.
But we need to develop standards about
Sure.
how house can't be buried in the middle of 10 lots.
Right.
And there's nothing on the street. All right. My second item, I'm going to give a little preamble here. We're a committee of the city council. We had asked the council to do a landscape ordinance. We know the importance of trees. They know the importance of trees. They adopted a specific plan or a strategy plan that has in the first 5 pages 10 references to trees in the forest. So going to what Don said about the downtown and the empty tree wells and being scandalous, it's sacrilegious too.
Yeah.
And it's just not vacant tree wells or stumps. It's places where there were trees, and those have been paved over now.
Yeah.
In front of Carmel Plaza, on 6th,
Oh, yes.
at 6th, there used to be a sycamore tree in the middle of the sidewalk. The building immediately south of the side entrance to the post office. There was a tree there, the tree was taken down, there's half a dozen sites downtown where pavement has replaced the forest. And I'd like the committee to authorize the chair to draft a letter to the council from the committee, because the guidelines we're working on are future-oriented. This is something today
Yeah.
that can be on our next agenda that we can have sent to the council.
Yeah.
Yes, Amen. Wow.
yeah,
Okay,
I
and
agree
then that begs the question that, you know, we are looking at the residential guidelines today, outline today. There probably isn't, is there a commercial outline yet, Brandon?
No, that's coming very soon.
Okay, because one of the things that I thought would be useful is this high-level structural principle discussion. It would be nice to have it about the commercial downtown also. I don't know if it's between now and Wednesday that it could be added, or
Oh,
if
no,
that,
no.
no way.
No, I think we're going to get through these.
Okay.
And then the commercial will follow the same arc.
Okay.
So it's on the tail of this.
Oh,
So we're
okay.
going to stay focused on this.
I see.
Yep, and
Okay.
get through this outline, and then we'll, by the time we're done with this,
Okay.
we'll have a commercial outline.
So the meeting is continued, unless, wait, are there any other final comments? Trying to get to my next meeting, too. If there are not any more final comments, I would continue the meeting, which means we haven't gotten to certain things even that we intended to, like future agenda items, for
yeah.
example. So,
We've got a ton of future agenda items.
yeah, we do.
And we
So,
need to do 2 or 3 a meeting,
yeah. So
a minimum of 2.
we'll do what we can. I think at least we I think made some substantive progress today on the outline. I understand this was a new framework, and I apologize. I literally thought of this last night after the meeting as a way to sort of frame our discussion. So
Yeah, it was good.
Well,
Yeah, thanks for doing
very
it.
good.
Okay.
Can I just say one thing? You know, we're talking about the downtown, and I'm all with you on that 1,000%. But because I'm a walker, I notice things that a lot of other people don't. I mean, they're in their car. There are a few people in this town who don't walk.
I'm not walking.
Well, you can't right now. But when we're writing the council about the downtown, do we want to mention what is going on in the residential neighborhoods as well? And talk about, you know, cutting down of the mature trees. Well, some of them, yes, you have to cut down, they're diseased and yada, yada. But the fact that, and they're pretty good now about getting rid of stumps, but can the steering committee think that it's appropriate to also talk about the residential neighborhoods where we have, in some areas, there are just a ton, literally, of big, huge trees being taken down, and then they're not replaced. Now, not that this hasn't been going on for a number of years, because I can walk in my quadrant, and I can tell you exactly where trees and the kind of tree that used to be there, and there's nothing there.
Well,
they have been left.
We may have to do this as a future, well, you guys can direct maybe as a future agenda item when we continue the meeting. I don't think we can do it right now.
No, we
Right?
can't, but I'm
Okay.
just saying include that in the letter
Yeah,
that we're
yeah,
gonna
yeah.
send.
Yeah, let's discuss
Do
that.
you mind doing that?
Well, let's discuss that. I mean, again, I don't think that's an agenda item for today, unless I'm wrong.
No, but, yeah,
So on the next
meeting.
agenda, and
Yeah,
then we will
this
discuss
letter.
that item, for
If
sure.
we could have 2 paragraphs,
Yeah.
one
But don't
on
discuss it now,
downtown.
though.
No, I'm not.
Okay.
One for downtown, and another point being the residential area and what we think.
Let's do it. I don't, no objections. Everybody okay with that?
Brandon, are you kind of, are you with that?
Yeah, I mean, you guys will, give that direction at the next meeting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Okay, so we're not adjourned, but we're going to go home, and then we're going to come back.
Right.
Because the meeting's continued.
Right.
Okay. That's right. That's right. We practically live here.
I realized, I think